I unlocked my front door expecting the quiet hum of my penthouse. Instead, I walked into a live open house. A real estate agent was standing in my foyer. While a couple of strangers photographed my living room like they already owned it, flanking them were my parents. My mother did not even blink when she saw me. She simply turned to the buyers and said, "We close today, $950,000. My name is Ruby Foster, and at 34 years old, I had finally constructed a life that operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. I worked in compliance. I dealt in facts, in hard lines, in regulations that did not bend simply because someone began to cry. My apartment in the Glasswater Heights building in downtown Riverton, Colorado, was the physical manifestation of that order. It was a penthouse, yes, but more than that, it was a sanctuary of silence. It was the one place in the world where no one asked me for money, where no one needed to be bailed out of a county jail, and where the chaotic entropy of my family could not touch me. Or so I thought until the elevator doors slid open on the 22nd floor. The first thing that hit me was the smell. My home usually smelled of nothing just cool. Filtered air and perhaps the faint, lingering scent of the lemon oil I used on the wood floors. Today, the hallway reeked of a heavy, floral perfume, the kind that tries too hard to announce wealth but only achieves suffocation. I stepped out of the elevator, my work bag heavy on my shoulder, the tension of a 10-hour day at the firm still knotting the muscles in my neck. I expected the solitude of my foyer. Instead, I walked straight into a performance. Standing in the center of my entryway was a woman I did not know. She was polished to a high shine, wearing a beige blazer that looked tailored within an inch of its life, and a smile that was professionally plastered onto her face. She held a glossy brochure in one hand and was gesturing grandly toward my living room with the other. "As you can see," she was saying, her voice pitching up with sales enthusiasm, "the natural light in the afternoon is simply unparalleled in Riverton. You get the full sweep of the mountains without any of the highway noise." Behind her, a couple stood in the center of my living room. The man was tall, wearing a cashmere sweater draped over his shoulders, holding his phone up to capture the panoramic view from my floor-to-ceiling windows. The woman was running her hand along the back of my Italian leather sofa, testing the texture as if she were at a furniture showroom. They looked like they belonged in a magazine. They looked like they were mentally measuring my square footage for their own future. And flanking them, standing with the casual, proprietary air of legitimate owners, were my parents, Diane and Scott Foster, my mother. Diane was nodding vigorously at something the potential buyer was saying. She wore her church clothes, a navy dress, and a string of pearls that I knew were fake, and she had that manic glint in her eyes. The one that always appeared when she was cornered and desperate. My father, Scott, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking out the window with a solemn, Lord of the Manor expression that made my stomach turn. I stood frozen near the elevator. For a second, I thought I had hallucinated the entire scene. Perhaps I had suffered a stroke from stress. But then the strange woman in the blazer turned, saw me, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before brightening again. "Oh, you must be the daughter," she chirped. "Diane mentioned you might stop by to pick up some things before the staging is finalized." The daughter. Pick up some things. The words rearranged the reality in the room. In this woman's mind, I was not the owner. I was a transient, a guest in my own mortgage. My mother's head snapped toward me. The color drained from her face, leaving her rouge standing out like bruises on her cheeks. But Diane Foster was nothing if not a master of recovery. She stepped forward quickly, intercepting me before I could take another step toward the strangers touching my furniture. "Ruby," she said, her voice tight, pitched high enough for the room to hear, but with an edge of steel underneath. "You are early." She moved into my personal space, blocking my view of the realtor. Her hand gripped my forearm, her nails digging into the sleeve of my blazer. It was not a hug, it was a restraint. "What is happening?" I asked. My voice was low, devoid of the scream that was building in my throat. I had learned long ago that screaming at my parents only gave them fuel. Silence terrified them. "We are selling," my mother whispered, the words rushing out of her like steam from a cracked pipe. "We have to close today. The offer is $950,000. It is a cash offer. Ruby, no contingencies." I repeated. "There is no we. This is my apartment." "It is for Blair," she hissed, glancing over her shoulder to make sure the realtor whose name tag read Tessa Grant. Premier Realty was distracted by the buyers. "She is in trouble. Ruby, real trouble this time. It is not just credit cards. It is bad people. They need money by tomorrow, or they are going to hurt her." I looked at my father. Scott Foster refused to meet my eyes. He was busy nodding at the husband, who was pointing at my built-in bookshelves and making a chopping motion with his hand. Likely discussing demolition. "So you broke into my house," I said, my voice flat. "And you put it on the market." "We did not break in," my father said. Finally coming over. He kept his voice low, a growl that used to scare me when I was 10, but now just sounded pathetic. "Your mother had the spare keycard. We are doing what has to be done for this family. Blair is your sister." "Blair is a 30-year-old gambling addict," I corrected him. "She is family," my mother whispered, her eyes welling up with practiced tears. "And this offer, Ruby, $950,000. It pays off everything. It gives her a fresh start. We can pay you back the equity later, over time. We just need the cash infusion now." The audacity was so immense it was almost impressive. They were not asking to borrow money. They were liquidating my entire life, my hard-earned asset, my sanctuary, to throw it into the black hole that was my sister's debt. And they were doing it right in front of me, banking on the fact that I was too polite, too well-mannered, to cause a scene in front of strangers. They were weaponizing my own dignity against me. I looked past my mother at Tessa Grant. The realtor was beaming at the couple. "The sellers are very motivated," she was saying. "That is why the price is so aggressive for this location. If we can get the paperwork signed this evening, the keys are yours by the weekend." "The weekend," the woman buyer said, looking around my living room with a dreamy expression. "We could host the gala pre-party here." "Absolutely," Tessa agreed. I felt a coldness settle over me. It started at the base of my spine and radiated outward, freezing the rage into something hard and sharp. If I screamed now, if I shouted that they were intruders, the buyers would leave. Tessa Grant would leave. My parents would be embarrassed, yes, but they would drag me into a screaming match. They would gaslight me. They would say I was hysterical. They would claim I had agreed to it earlier and changed my mind. It would become a domestic dispute. The police would come, take a report, and tell us it was a civil matter. But if I let them continue, if I let them generate the paperwork, then it wasn't a family dispute. It was fraud. It was a felony. I needed them to commit to the lie. I needed witnesses. I took a breath and forced my shoulders to relax. I unhooked my mother's claws from my arm and stepped around her. "Ruby," my mother hissed, panic flaring in her eyes. I walked straight toward Tessa Grant. The realtor turned, her smile tightening slightly. She sensed the tension, but she wanted the commission more than she wanted the truth. "Hi," I said. "I am Ruby." "Tessa Grant," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Your parents are lovely. They have been telling us how much you enjoyed living here, but that you are ready to move closer to the coast." The lie was detailed, of course. "Yes," I lied, my voice steady. "It has been a great home." My father exhaled loudly behind me. I could hear the relief in it. He thought he had won. He thought his intimidation tactic had worked, that I had folded just like I always did when I was 20. He did not realize that the Ruby he was dealing with now was not the daughter who sought his approval. She was a woman who read contracts for a living. "Do you mind if we look at the master bedroom?" the husband asked. He was looking at me now, assuming I was part of the transaction. "We want to see if a California king bed fits in that space." I felt a wave of nausea. My bedroom, my private space. They wanted to go in there, measure it, judge it, Go ahead, I said. The light is best in there right now. My mother looked at me, confused by my sudden capitulation. She blinked, her mouth slightly open. She had expected a fight. She had prepared for tears. She was not prepared for compliance. See, my father muttered, clapping a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy and possessive. She is on board. Ruby knows what is important. I watched the strangers walk down the hallway toward my bedroom. I watched them step onto the white rug I had bought with my first bonus check. I watched the woman open my closet door, my closet, and peer inside at my clothes. Good space, she called out. Excellent flow, Tessa Grant added, scribbling something on her notepad. I stood in the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my face completely blank. I needed to remember everything. I looked at the coffee table. My mail was gone. My parents must have swept it away to hide my name. I looked at the kitchen counter. There was a folder there, thick with papers, a listing agreement, a sales contract. I looked at my mother's hands. She was clutching her purse tightly with both hands. In the front pocket, I saw the edge of a white plastic card. My spare elevator pass, the one I kept in the emergency drawer in the kitchen. She had stolen it weeks ago, probably during that friendly visit for coffee. So, I said to my father, keeping my voice conversational, you are closing today. We have to, he said, stepping close to me, blocking my view of the realtor. His voice dropped to that menacing register he used when he wanted to remind me who was the patriarch. Blair's debt is $180,000, but the interest is killing her, and there are other things. This sale covers it all. You are doing the right thing. Ruby, do not embarrass us. You will sign the papers when they bring them out. I will sign, I said, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. When everything is legal, he took that as a yes. Good girl. The buyers came back out, looking flushed and happy. We love it, the husband said. We are ready to move forward immediately. Tessa said the title work is already preliminary. Yes, Tessa said, beaming. We can head to the office right now to handle the earnest money and get the signatures notarized. My broker has everything prepped. Signatures, notarized. They were going to forge my signature, or perhaps they had already brought someone in to do it, or maybe they expected me to sit there and sign away nearly $1 million of my own net worth to cover my sister's gambling losses. I need to head out, I said abruptly. I have things to pack. Of course, Tessa said. We will get out of your hair. We will meet at the law office in an hour. Your parents have the address. Which office? I asked, casually. Caldwell and Pierce, my mother interjected quickly. We know where it is. Caldwell and Pierce. I filed the name away. Actually, I said, turning to Tessa, could I get your card? Just in case I have questions about the move-out dates. Oh, certainly. Tessa fumbled in her blazer pocket and produced a sleek, heavy business card, gold foil on matte black, Tessa Grant, senior broker, Premier Realty. I took the card. It felt cold in my hand. It was the first physical piece of evidence in the chain of custody I was building in my mind. Thank you, I said. See you in an hour. Sweetie, my mother said, her voice dripping with fake affection. She reached out to pat my cheek. I didn't flinch, but I didn't lean into it either. We will fix everything for Blair. You will see. I am sure you will try, I said. I turned and walked back to the elevator. I pressed the call button. I could feel their eyes on my back. The buyers were probably thinking I was a bit cold, a bit detached for someone selling their home. My parents were probably thinking they had successfully bullied me into submission one more time. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside and turned around. For a moment, the tableau was framed perfectly by the steel doors. My beautiful, light-filled living room. The strangers planning to gut it. The realtor calculating her 3% commission. And my parents, standing there with the smug satisfaction of thieves who think they have just pulled off the perfect heist. My father gave me a sharp nod. A final command to behave. I stared back at him, my face a mask of absolute neutral calm. I did not nod back. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of them, As the elevator began its smooth, silent descent to the lobby, the adrenaline finally hit me. My hands started to shake. I looked down at the business card in my palm. I was gripping it so hard the corners were digging into my skin, leaving white crescent marks. I was not going to the law office to sign. I was not going to call Blair to ask if she was okay. I was not going to cry in my car. My parents had made a critical error. They assumed that because I was their daughter, I would operate under the laws of family where guilt is currency and forgiveness is mandatory. They did not realize that today, they had stepped out of the family dynamic and into my jurisdiction. They had entered the world of property law, of recorded deeds, of fraud investigations. They thought they could control me with fear, but they had forgotten what I did for a living. I looked at the gold foil name on the card one last time. They fear paperwork more than anger, and I was about to bury them in it. The drive to the law offices of Caldwell and Pierce took exactly 18 minutes. I did not speed. I did not weave through traffic. I drove with the mechanical obedience of a woman who knows that one traffic violation could give them the excuse they needed to call me unstable. My hands were at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, but my mind was already 3 moves ahead, dismantling the chessboard they had set up. Caldwell and Pierce was located in one of those faux historical brick buildings on the edge of downtown Riverton, the kind of place that smelled of old money and quiet settlements. It was the firm my parents had used for decades. They were not high-powered corporate litigators. They were family fixers. They were the people you paid to make a DUI disappear or to structure a trust so that the government could not touch it. They specialized in the gray areas of polite society, and my mother loved them because they made her feel protected. I parked my car in the visitor lot. The engine ticked as it cooled. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I did not look like a woman who had just been ambushed in her own foyer. I looked like an auditor arriving for a surprise inspection. That was exactly what I needed to be. I walked through the heavy oak double doors and into the reception area. The air inside was cool and smelled of furniture polish and stale coffee. The receptionist was a young woman I did not recognize, likely an intern or a new hire. She looked up from her computer, her smile bright and practiced. "Good afternoon," she said. "Can I help you?" "I am here to see Martin Pierce," I said. She glanced at her screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Do you have an appointment, Mr. Pierce is preparing for a closing right now." "I know," I said. "I am the closing—" She blinked, confused. "Oh, you must be—" "I am the owner of the property," I cut in. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel strike. I did not give her my name. I gave her my title. "Tell him I am here," she hesitated, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure, and picked up the phone. She whispered something urgent into the receiver, nodded twice, and then hung up. "He will be right out," she said, her voice dropping an octave. I did not sit down. I stood in the center of the Persian rug, my bag held firmly in my left hand, my right hand free. I needed to remain vertical. Sitting puts you in a position of supplication. Standing makes you an obstacle. 2 minutes later, the door to the inner offices opened. Martin Pierce walked out. He was a man in his late 50s, wearing a gray suit that cost more than my first car. He had the kind of silver hair that inspired trust in elderly widows, and a face that had settled into a permanent expression of weary benevolence. I had known him since I was a child. He had handled the paperwork when I bought the Penthouse 5 years ago. He knew exactly who I was, and he knew exactly whose money usually paid his retainers. "Ruby," he said, spreading his hands as if to embrace a wayward niece. His voice was smooth, coated in that sickeningly sweet veneer of family familiarity. "It is good to see you. Your father called. He said you were on your way." He walked toward me, expecting a handshake, perhaps even a hug. I stayed where I was. "He said you were ready to sign," Pierce continued, not letting my silence deter him. "I have to say, it is a generous offer. $950,000 in this market. You are doing a wonderful thing for your sister. Family really is everything, isn't it?" He was following the script. He assumed the narrative my parents had fed him was the only truth in the room, the dutiful daughter helping the wayward sister, the tragic but necessary sale. He thought he was just the facilitator of a noble sacrifice. Martin, I said. I did not use his title. I used his first name to strip away the professional barrier he was hiding behind. Before we discuss any signatures, I need you to do something for me. He paused, his smile faltering just a fraction. Of course. Do you need water, coffee? We can go into the conference room and I need you to pull the property record, I said. The silence that followed was brief but sharp. Pierce looked at me as if I had asked him to perform a magic trick. I beg your pardon. The abstract of title, I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. The current status from the county clerk's office. I want to see it, now. Pierce let out a short, dismissive laugh. It was a sound meant to belittle me, to remind me that I was the client's daughter, not the expert. Ruby, we have the title commitment right here in the file. It was pulled last week when your parents first discussed the listing. It is clean. We don't need to. I want the live record, I interrupted. Not the paper in your file. I want to see what the county database says right now. Today. He sighed. A long, exaggerated exhalation of patience being tested. He looked at his watch, a gold Rolex that probably cost $20,000. Ruby, the buyers will be here in 20 minutes. Your parents are parking the car. We really do not have time for procedural theatrics. The paperwork is standard. I drafted it myself. If it is clean, I said, then it will only take 2 minutes. I did not move. I did not blink. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until the receptionist stopped typing to watch us. Pierce looked at my face and saw something he evidently had not expected. He saw that I was not going to move until he complied. Fine, he said, his tone clipping with annoyance. If it will make you feel better, come back. He turned and walked toward his office. I followed him, stepping over the threshold into his domain. His office was lined with mahogany bookshelves filled with leather-bound legal volumes that no one read anymore. His desk was massive, a fortress of dark wood covered in organized stacks of paper. He walked around the desk and sat down, waking up his computer with an aggressive jiggle of the mouse. I stood on the other side of the desk, leaning forward slightly, watching his screen. This is highly irregular, he muttered as he navigated to the county portal. The title company handles this at closing. There is no reason to think anything has changed in 4 days. Humor me, I said. He typed in his credentials. The sound of his typing was loud in the quiet room. Click, clack, click. He navigated to the property search function. He typed in the address, Glasswater Heights, Unit 2201. He hit the enter key. Here, he said, pointing at the screen without really looking. As I said, owner of record is Ruby Foster. No liens other than the primary mortgage. Clean title. Ready for... His voice stopped. It didn't taper off. It cut out completely, like a radio cord had been severed. I watched his face. The annoyance vanished, replaced instantly by a slack-jawed confusion. He leaned closer to the monitor, squinting. He moved the mouse, clicking on something, then clicking again. Harder this time. What is this? He whispered. I walked around the desk. He was too shocked to stop me. I stood over his shoulder and looked at the screen. The text was in bold red letters across the top of the property summary. It was not a lien. It was not a mortgage recording. It was a status flag that I had never seen on a residential property before. Status locked / transfer hold. Below that, in smaller text, contact recorder's Ottawa's office immediately. Do not process. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I had expected to see a pending sale, perhaps a fraudulent listing agreement filed early. I had not expected a total lockdown. A transfer hold was nuclear. It meant the system itself had rejected the property. Pierce sat back in his chair, his face losing its healthy country club flush. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. This is a lock, he stammered. The county has locked the title. I looked at him, studying his reaction. Was he acting? Was this part of the plan? But the sweat beading on his upper lip looked real. The way his hands hovered uselessly over the keyboard looked like genuine panic. "Why is it locked, Martin?" I asked. My voice was quiet. "Dangerous." He shook his head, scrolling down the page with a frantic motion. "I don't know. This doesn't make sense. A hold like this usually happens with a court order or a federal investigation." He clicked on the history tab. The timestamp was there, glowing on the screen. Action Administrative Lock Date, January 19th, 2026, time 9:15 a.m. 9:15 this morning, Pierce read aloud. His voice was trembling slightly. "That was 4 hours ago." "Right before my parents showed up at my apartment," I said. Pierce looked up at me, his eyes wide. The paternal condescension was gone. In its place was the terrifying realization that he was in the middle of something he did not understand. He was a fixer. Yes, but he was a fixer of small, messy family secrets. He was not prepared for a county-level lockdown. "Ruby," he said, and this time his voice was pleading. "What is going on? Your father told me you authorized the sale. He brought me the power of attorney draft yesterday. He said you were too busy to come in for the prep work." "I never signed a power of attorney," I said. Pierce went very still. "But he has it. He said he has the signed copy." "Then he has a forgery," I said. "And if you try to push a deed through with a locked title and a forged authorization, Martin, you are not just looking at a malpractice suit, you are looking at disbarment." He swallowed hard. I could see the gears turning in his head, survival instinct kicking in. He was calculating his exposure. He was realizing that the easy favor for the Foster family had just turned into a radioactive isotope. "The lock," he murmured, looking back at the screen. "It says, identity verification required. Someone flagged this. Someone told the recorder that the seller might not be the seller. Who filed the request?" I asked. "It doesn't say," Pierce said. "It just says, internal alert." "What did they file to trigger it?" I pressed. "Did my parents try to record something this morning?" I don't know," Pierce stammered. "I didn't send anything over yet. We were waiting for the buyers to sign the contract tonight. Unless—" He trailed off, his eyes darting to the corner of his desk where a stack of manila folders sat. "Unless what?" I demanded. "Unless they tried to record the mortgage payoff early," he whispered, mostly to himself. "Your mother asked for the payoff statement 2 days ago. She said she wanted to be ready." The air in the room felt thin, insufficient for the amount of tension expanding within the 4 walls. The red letters on the screen seemed to pulse, locked. I opened my mouth to ask another question, to drill down into the payoff statement discrepancy, but the heavy sound of the outer door opening cut me off. We both froze. "Martin!" My father's voice boomed from the reception area. It was jovial, loud, the voice of a man who believes he owns the room he just walked into. "We are here. Sorry for the delay. Parking was a nightmare." "We brought the champagne," my mother's voice chimed in, shrill and excited. Pierce looked at me. His face was gray. He looked like a man who wanted to crawl under his desk. I did not hide. I did not step back. I stood exactly where I was, next to the lawyer, my hand resting on the edge of his desk, right next to the screen that screamed of fraud. The door to the office swung open. My parents walked in. My father was holding a thick folder of papers, looking for all the world like a captain of industry closing a merger. My mother was clutching a bottle of expensive champagne. Her face flushed with the anticipation of money. They looked at Martin Pierce, expecting a smile. Then they saw me. They saw me standing next to the lawyer. They saw the lawyer's pale, sweating face, and for the first time in my life, they did not look at me with dismissal or contempt. They looked at the screen behind me, and they stopped. "Ruby," my mother said, the champagne bottle lowering slowly in her hand. "What are you doing back there?" I looked at Martin Pierce. I waited. The test was simple. Would he protect the client who paid him, or would he protect the license that kept him out of jail? Pierce stood up slowly. He did not smile. He did not offer them a seat. "Scott," Pierce said, his voice dry as dust, "we have a problem with the title." My father's smile didn't just fade, it fell off his face. "What problem?" "It is her apartment. She is right here." "The county doesn't seem to think so," I said. My father's eyes snapped to mine. There was a flicker of something there, not fear. Not yet. It was the cold, calculating look of a predator assessing a sudden change in the wind. "What did you do?" he hissed at me. "I didn't do anything," I said, pointing at the screen. "The question is, what did you do at 9:15 this morning that made the county lock my house down?" The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the computer fan, cooling the machine that held the evidence of their crime. My mother's grip on the champagne bottle tightened until her knuckles were white. "Martin," my father said, his voice dropping to a low, warning growl. "Fix it. I can't fix a fraud hold." "Scott," Pierce said, and I saw his allegiance shift in real time. He was cutting the rope. He was letting them drift. "Not until I see exactly what you filed." My father took a step forward, the folder of papers in his hand raising slightly like a weapon. "I filed what was necessary." "Show us," I said, and that was when the fear finally entered the room. It wasn't the fear of getting caught. They were too arrogant for that yet. It was the fear of the mechanism. They were realizing that the machine of the law had gears they couldn't grease with charm or intimidation. And right now, those gears were grinding directly toward them. The folder in my mother's hand hit Martin Pierce's mahogany desk with a heavy, authoritative thud. It was the sound of a gavel, or perhaps a coffin lid closing. To Diane Foster. That stack of papers was not a legal request. It was a completed reality, a trophy she had already won, and I was merely a bureaucratic hurdle she had to clear to claim the prize money. "Just have Ruby sign the addendum," my mother said, her voice bright and brittle, ignoring the tension that was sucking the oxygen out of the room. "The buyers are waiting at the coffee shop around the corner. We told them we just needed to clear up a typo, just a little typo." She gestured to the papers as if offering me a gift. "Sign it, Ruby, then we can go to dinner. Your father made a reservation at the Chop House." I looked at the folder, then I looked at the computer screen behind Martin Pierce. Where the red letters locked were still burning like an accusation. My parents were ignoring the screen. They were choosing to exist in a universe where their desires superseded county databases. "Did you not hear the lawyer?" I asked, my voice flat. "The title is locked. You cannot sell what the county has frozen." My father, Scott Foster, made a sharp, dismissive motion with his hand, like he was shooing away a fly. He turned his glare onto Martin Pierce. He did not look at Pierce as a legal counsel. He looked at him as a service provider who was failing to deliver the product. "Fix it, Martin," my father ordered. "In the file again, override it. Whatever computer glitch this is, I want it gone in 5 minutes. We have a cash deal on the table." "Scott, it is not a glitch," Pierce began, his voice wavering. He was sweating now, a visible sheen on his forehead. "It is a fraud hold. It is a mistake," my father shouted, his voice booming in the small, book-lined office. "We are the parents. She is the daughter. It is all the same money in the end. Just print a clean deed. Get the notary in here. Let's finish this." He was trying to bulldoze the law. It was a tactic that had worked for him his entire life. He bullied waitstaff, he bullied contractors, and he bullied his children. He assumed the recorder's office of Riverton County was just another entity he could intimidate into submission. I stepped forward. I moved into the space between my father and the desk. I needed to anchor the reality of this situation before Pierce folded under the pressure. "Martin," I said, "print the screen." Pierce blinked, looking from my father's red face to my cold one. "What?" "Print the current screen," I commanded. "The one showing the lock, the one showing the timestamp of 9:15 this morning. Print it now." "Don't you dare," my father growled. "Martin, do not waste paper on this nonsense." "Print it," I repeated. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I spoke with the absolute certainty of a woman who knows exactly where the trapdoor is located. If you do not print it, Martin, I will have to assume you are refusing to provide a client me with the current status of my asset. That would look very poor in a complaint to the Bar Association. Pierce's hand shot to the mouse. He clicked the print icon. The laser printer in the corner whirred to life. The sound was mechanical and rhythmic, filling the silence. Chug, whir, slide. My father lunged for the tray as the paper slid out. He wanted to crush it. He wanted to physically destroy the evidence that said no. I was faster. I didn't grab. I didn't scramble. I simply placed my hand flat on the printer tray, covering the paper as it emerged. My palm pressed down on the warm sheet. I looked my father in the eye. He stopped, his hand hovering inches from mine. He was physically stronger than me, but he hesitated to strike me here, in a lawyer's office, with a witness present. Even he had limits. "This is my record," I said. "Back up." He glared at me, his jaw working, but he took a half step back. "You are being dramatic. You always were dramatic." I picked up the paper. The ink was still warm. I scanned it. Status locked / transfer hold. It was real. It was physical. I folded it once, sharp and precise, and slid it into the inside pocket of my blazer. Seeing that aggression had failed, my mother instantly deployed her secondary weapon. The aggression drained from her face, replaced by a look of tragic, martyrdom-fueled sorrow. She slumped slightly, making herself look smaller, frailer. "Ruby," she said, her voice trembling with a tearful frequency that used to break my heart when I was 20. "How can you be so cold? We are talking about your sister." "We are talking about my house," I corrected. "Blair is drowning," she whispered. "She called me yesterday. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. She has people after her. Ruby. Scary people. Not credit card companies. These are loan sharks. They threatened to come to her workplace." "So you decided the solution was to sell my home. You live alone in a penthouse," she cried out, spreading her arms. $950,000 sitting in walls and floors, while your sister is terrified to answer her phone. Does that sound right to you? Does that sound moral? You have so much space. You have a guest room you never use. You have a view of the mountains, and Blair is living in a basement apartment, afraid for her life. It was a masterclass in deflection. In 3 sentences, she had turned me from the victim of grand larceny into a selfish hoarder of wealth. She made my success sound like a sin. "How much?" I asked. My mother blinked. "What? How much is the debt?" I asked. "If she is drowning, tell me the depth of the water." My parents exchanged a glance. It was a quick, microsecond flick of the eyes that told me everything. They did not have a number. They had a panic. "It is significant," my father grunted. "Around 180,000, maybe 220 with the late fees. We need the full sale amount to be safe, to set her up. To give her a cushion so she doesn't fall back in." "A cushion," I repeated. "You want to sell my asset to give a gambling addict a $600,000 cushion?" "She is not an addict," my mother snapped. "She is unlucky. She makes bad investments. 180 to 220 is a $40,000 variance," I said, my voice cutting through their fog. "You don't even know who she owes. You just know she wants money. And you decided I was the bank." "We are a family," my father shouted. Slamming his hand on the desk, Martin Pierce jumped. "We do what is necessary. You would not understand because you only care about your contracts and your rules. You have no heart, Ruby. You never did." "I have a heart," I said. "I just don't use it to sign checks." I turned to Martin Pierce. He was watching this domestic demolition with the horrified fascination of a passerby at a car wreck. "Martin," I said, "I want to see the documents they brought you." Pierce hesitated. He looked at my father. "Show her," I said. "They are trying to sell my property. I have a right to see the instrument they are using to do it." "Martin, do not give her those," my father warned. "Those are confidential drafts. They are documents purporting to be signed by me," I said. "If you do not show them to me, Martin, I will call the police right now and report a theft in progress. Do you want uniformed officers in your reception area? Think about your other clients. That was the lever. The threat to his reputation. Pierce reached for the folder my mother had dropped. He opened it and slid 3 documents across the desk toward me. I picked them up. My hands were steady. I forced them to be steady. The first was a listing agreement, granting Premier Realty the exclusive right to sell Unit 2201. The second was a purchase and sale agreement, dated today, already signed by the buyers I had met in my living room. The third was the general power of attorney. I focused on the power of attorney. This was the key. This was the weapon. It was a standard form, likely downloaded from a legal template site. It granted Scott and Diane Foster full authority to sell, convey, and encumber my property. And at the bottom was my signature, Ruby Elena Foster. I stared at it. It was a beautiful signature. It looped and flowed with the exact cadence of the way I signed my name. It was perfect. Too perfect. I ran my thumb over the ink. It was smooth, completely flat. This is a scan, I said. It is an electronic signature. My father lied quickly. You signed it via DocuSign last year, for the tax appeal, remember? I remember the tax appeal, I said. I signed that document in blue ink. This is black, and if you look closely, I held the paper up to the light. The edges of the ink lines were pixelated. It wasn't a wet signature. It wasn't even a high-quality digital signature. It was a Photoshop job. They had lifted my signature from an old birthday card or a check, cleaned it up, and pasted it here. And the notary, I said, moving my eyes to the stamp, State of Colorado, Notary Public, Sarah J. Miller. The stamp looked official. It had a commission number and an expiration date, June 12, 2027. Who is Sarah Miller? I asked. She is a friend, my mother said. Too quickly. She came over for tea. You were there. Ruby, you don't remember. I have never met a Sarah Miller, I said, and I certainly did not sign this in front of her. I looked at Pierce. Martin, look at the commission number. Pierce leaned in. He was a lawyer. He looked at notary stamps all day. He squinted at the 10-digit number. What about it? He asked. The sequence, I said. Colorado commission numbers start with the year they were issued. This starts with 22. That means it was issued in 2022. 4-year commissions. It should expire in 2026. Why does this stamp say 2027? Pierce went rigid. He pulled the paper closer. He did the math in his head. You are right, he whispered. The dates don't align. It is a fake stamp, I said. You bought it online. Or you made it. I looked at my parents. They were not looking at the paper. They were looking at me with a mixture of hatred and shock. They were shocked not because they were caught, but because I was dissecting their miracle. I wasn't screaming about betrayal. I was auditing their forgery. It is a typo on the stamp, my father insisted, though his voice lacked its earlier thunder. Sarah is a legitimate notary. You are grasping at straws. Ruby, you want to send your sister to the wolves because of a typo on a stamp. I am not the one sending her to the wolves, I said. You are the ones who promised her money you didn't have. You are the ones who put a fake deed in motion. We did this for you, my mother screamed. The mask finally fell off completely. Her face twisted into something ugly and raw. We did this so you wouldn't have to worry. We were going to handle it. We were going to pay the debt. And you would never have known we were protecting you from the stress. You were stealing my house to protect me from stress. We would have paid you back, she shrieked. Eventually, when the market turned. When your father's deal came through, you act like we are criminals. We are your parents. Criminals and parents are not mutually exclusive categories, I said. I turned back to Pierce. Martin, you are holding a forged power of attorney with a fraudulent notary seal, attempting to facilitate a sale on a property that is under a fraud lock by the county. You have the listing agreement there. Did you verify my identity with the broker, or did you take my father's word for it? Pierce looked ill. He pushed the papers away from him as if they were contaminated with anthrax. I relied on the representation of the parents, he stammered. I assumed. You assumed I was a passive participant, I said. You assumed I was the good daughter who would just nod along. I am withdrawing from this matter, Pierce said abruptly. He stood up, wiping his palms on his trousers. Scott, Diane, I cannot represent you in this. You need to take these papers and leave. Immediately. You can't do that, my father shouted. We have buyers coming in 10 minutes. We need the room. There are no buyers, Pierce yelled back, losing his composure for the first time. There is no sale. The title is locked. The documents are suspect. If I proceed 1 inch further, I am an accomplice. The air in the room vibrated with the energy of a collapse. My parents stood there, stripped of their authority, their plan disintegrating into confetti. They looked small. They looked tacky. The expensive suits and the champagne bottle suddenly looked like costumes in a play that had been canceled. I watched them. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't triumph. It was the final death of hope. Part of me, the small child part, had still hoped there was a misunderstanding, that maybe they had a plan to ask me, that maybe they respected me enough to ask. But the fake stamp proved otherwise. They hadn't just acted on impulse. They had bought a stamp. They had photoshopped a signature. They had planned this for weeks. I reached out and took the power of attorney and the listing agreement. Hey, my father shouted, reaching for them. Give those back. No, I said. These are evidence. They are my papers, he roared, stepping toward me with a raised fist. Scott, Pierce shouted, do not touch her. My father froze. The reality of where he was, a law office, checked his violence. He lowered his hand, breathing hard. You are ungrateful, he spat at me. After everything we gave you, the lessons, the college tuition. I paid my own tuition, I said softly. And I bought my own house, and now I am keeping it. I turned to leave. I had what I needed. I had the confession in their eyes, and the forgery in my hand. But before I could take a step, the silence was shattered by a sound that made everyone jump. It was the phone on Martin Pierce's desk. It wasn't the soft chirp of an internal line. It was the harsh, insistent ring of an outside priority call. Pierce stared at it. He didn't want to answer. He wanted to run out the back door. But the ringing was relentless. He reached out a shaking hand and picked up the receiver. He didn't lift it to his ear immediately. He looked at the caller ID display. I watched the blood drain out of his face so completely that his skin turned the color of old parchment. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked up at me, and then at my parents. The look in his eyes was not professional concern anymore. It was pure, unadulterated terror. Who is it? My father demanded, sensing the shift. Is it the buyers? Pierce shook his head slowly. He lifted the receiver to his ear, his hand trembling. Hello, he whispered. He listened for a second. Then he closed his eyes. Yes, he said. Yes, they are here. Yes, the documents are on my desk. He lowered the phone without saying goodbye. He looked at my father. That wasn't the buyers, Pierce said, his voice sounding hollow, like he was speaking from inside a grave. Who was it? I asked. It was the county recorder's fraud investigation unit, Pierce said, and the district attorney's office. My mother dropped the champagne bottle. It didn't break. It just hit the rug with a dull, heavy thud, rolling across the floor until it hit my shoe. They are in the lobby, Pierce said. They said nobody leaves. Martin Pierce placed the receiver back in its cradle with a movement so gentle it was terrifying. It was the careful, deliberate motion of a man handling explosives. He did not look at my parents. He did not look at the file on his desk. He looked at the air in front of him, his eyes unfocused, processing a reality that had shifted beneath his feet in the span of a 30-second phone call. The silence in the office was absolute. The hum of the building's HVAC system seemed to roar in the vacuum. My mother was still staring at the champagne bottle resting against my shoe. My father was breathing heavily through his nose, a bull waiting for the gate to open. "Martin," my father said, breaking the silence with a voice that tried for authority but landed on desperation. "Who was that? What did they say?" Pierce finally blinked. He turned his head slowly to look at Scott Foster. The deference was gone. The friendship was gone. In their place was the cold, survivalist calculation of a professional realizing he was standing in the blast radius of a felony. "That was the recorder," Pierce said. His voice was low, stripped of all legal posturing. "They confirmed the status. It is not an administrative error. Scott, it is a fraud hold." "That is ridiculous," my father spat. "I will call the mayor. I will—" "You will not call anyone," Pierce interrupted, his voice sharpening into a blade. "Not from my office, and not on my time. They did not just lock the file because of a glitch. They locked it because the fraud investigation unit flagged an attempt to record a document with a mismatched notary commission. They know, Scott. They know the stamp is bad." My mother let out a small, strangled sound. She brought her hands up to her mouth. Covering her lips as if to physically hold back a scream, Pierce did not offer her a tissue. Instead, he reached for the intercom button on his phone. He pressed it, holding it down with a white-knuckled grip. "Jessica," he said into the speaker, "lock the front door." "Excuse me, Mr. Pierce?" The receptionist's tinny voice replied. "Lock the main suite doors," Pierce commanded. "Engage the magnetic lock. No one leaves the waiting area. And tell the security officer in the lobby that we have a situation. Ask him to come up to the suite, now." He released the button. My father's face turned a violent shade of purple. He stepped toward the desk, his hands curling into fists. "What the hell are you doing? You are locking us in. We are your clients. Martin, I have paid your retainer for 20 years. "I am preserving the scene," Pierce said. Standing up, he moved back, putting the heavy oak chair between himself and my father. "I am an officer of the court, Scott. I have just been informed that a crime may have been committed using instruments prepared or processed through my office. If I let you walk out that door with those papers, I am not just your lawyer anymore. I am your accomplice, and I am not going to prison for your daughter's gambling debts." "You are kidnapping us," my father shouted. "This is false imprisonment." "It is a detention pending law enforcement arrival," Pierce corrected him, his lawyer brain finally engaging to protect himself. "And frankly, Scott, given that you just tried to hand me a power of attorney with a forged notary seal, I would suggest you stop shouting and start praying." The atmosphere in the room shifted from a business dispute to a hostage situation. But the hostage was the truth. My father looked at the door, then at the window, as if calculating an escape route. My mother simply sank into one of the guest chairs, her expensive dress pooling around her like a deflated parachute. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. This was a woman who navigated life through social pressure and emotional manipulation. She knew how to guilt a neighbor into lending her a car. She knew how to shame a manager into a discount, but she did not know how to manipulate a fraud statute. The law did not care if she was a mother. The law did not care if she was crying. The law only cared about the signature on the page. I stood perfectly still. I felt a strange sense of clarity, a hyper-awareness of every detail. I watched the way Pierce's hands shook as he adjusted his tie. I watched the way my father's eyes darted around the room, looking for a weapon or a way out. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the black card I had taken from the realtor in the lobby. Tessa Grant, senior broker, Premier Realty. I walked forward and placed the card on the center of Martin Pierce's desk. I set it down with a sharp tap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Pierce looked down at it. "What is this?" he asked. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the third party." I looked at my parents. My father stopped pacing. He stared at the card. "You brought a realtor into this," I said to him. "You didn't just print a fake document at home and try to slip it past Martin. You engaged a licensed broker. You allowed her to list the property on the MLS. You allowed her to bring buyers into my home. You allowed her to take earnest money. I turned back to Pierce. Martin, this isn't just an attempted recording, I said. They involved an external professional. Tessa Grant believes she has a valid listing agreement. She believes she has a valid seller. If this deal falls through because of fraud, which it will, she is going to lose a commission of nearly $30,000. She is going to be investigated by the Real Estate Commission. Do you think she is going to stay silent? She is going to testify that Scott and Diane Foster presented themselves as agents of the owner. Pierce stared at the card. I could see the realization hitting him. It was one thing to conspire within a family. It was another thing to drag a licensed broker into the web. The circle of liability had just expanded exponentially. They had people in my apartment, I continued, pressing the advantage. Actual buyers, a couple. They were measuring the floors. They were taking photos. If my parents accepted a deposit check, or if they signed a purchase agreement today, which they did, then they have committed wire fraud the moment that money hits an escrow account. My mother let out a sob. We didn't mean for it to go this far. We just needed the advance. You signed a contract, I said, looking at her. You signed a contract to sell $1 million asset that does not belong to you. That is not a misunderstanding. Mother, that is grand larceny. Stop it, my father roared. Stop using those words. They are the correct words, I said. I looked at Pierce. Martin, I want copies. He looked up, dazed. What? I want copies of everything in that folder, I said, pointing to the stack my father was still guarding. The power of attorney, the listing agreement, the purchase contract, and the email correspondence where my father sent you the draft. No, my father said, reaching for the folder. These are private, attorney-client privilege. The privilege does not apply to the furtherance of a crime, I said, reciting the exception I knew Pierce learned in his first year of law school. And since I am the victim, and I am standing right here, I am demanding preservation of evidence. I looked Pierce in the eye. If you let him take those papers, Martin, or if you let him destroy them, you are obstructing justice. Is that what you want to add to your file today? Pierce made a decision. He reached out and placed his hand firmly on top of the folder, pinning it to the desk. Scott, Pierce said, his voice shaking but firm. Let go of the folder. Martin, my father warned. Let go, Pierce said. I am going to scan these into the firm's secure drive, and I am keeping the originals in the safe until the authorities tell me otherwise. Nobody is destroying anything today. My father held on for a second longer, a tug of war over his own destruction. Then, with a curse, he let go. He turned his back on us and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot, his shoulders heaving. Pierce opened the folder. He didn't look at the contents. He just fed the pages into the scanner on his credenza. The machine whirred, digitizing the lies. Zzzt, zzzt. Each page was a nail in the coffin. While the scanner worked, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since I saw the notary stamp. Martin, I said, how did it get this far? You are a careful man. You have known me for 20 years. How did you accept a power of attorney without seeing me, without calling me? Pierce stopped typing on his keyboard. He looked down at his hands. He looked old. I asked, he said softly. When Scott brought the draft in last week, I asked where you were. He said you were in meetings. He said you were stressed about the sisters' situation. He said you wanted them to handle it so you didn't have to deal with the emotions. And the signature, I asked. The notary. He told me he had a mobile notary meet you at your office, Pierce admitted. He brought the document back signed. The stamp looked real. The signature looked like yours. I didn't verify the commission number. I assumed that because it was your father, because we have done business for so long. He trailed off. It was the classic failure of the family lawyer. He had let familiarity breed negligence. He had suspended his professional skepticism because he was dealing with good people from the country club. He had forgotten that good people are often the most desperate. You assumed I was compliant, I said. You assumed I was the same quiet girl who used to sit in your lobby while her parents signed wills. You didn't respect me enough to verify my consent. I am sorry. Ruby, Pierce whispered. I truly am. Sorry doesn't unlist my house, I said, and it doesn't unlock the title. My father turned around from the window. The fear had curdled back into anger. He couldn't attack Pierce, the lawyer, held the keys to the door, so he turned on the easier target. Look at you, he sneered, pointing a finger at me. Standing there so high and mighty, you are enjoying this, aren't you? You love seeing your mother cry. You love seeing me humiliated. I am not enjoying this, I said. I am surviving this. You are destroying this family, he shouted. Over money. It is just money. Ruby, we could have paid it back. We could have fixed it. But you had to involve the police. You had to involve the county. You are sending your own sister to the gutter because you are too selfish to share. I am not destroying the family, I said, my voice rising for the first time, cutting through his noise. I am protecting my name. I am protecting my signature. That signature is my identity. It is my word. You stole it. You stole my name, and you put it on a lie. We gave you that name, he yelled, and you don't get to take it back whenever you need cash. I yelled back. The room fell silent again. My mother was sobbing softly into her hands. My father was panting, his face red and wet with perspiration. Pierce was standing behind his desk, looking like he wanted to vanish. I worked for everything I have, I said, lowering my voice to a lethal whisper. I bought that penthouse. I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. You didn't buy it for me. You don't own it. And you don't get to sell it to fix the mistakes you made raising Blair. Blair is a victim, my mother wailed. Blair is 30 years old, I said, and so am I. And today, the difference is that I am the one with the deed, and she is the one with the debt. That is not luck. That is choices. I looked at the scanner. It had finished. The documents were preserved. The evidence was locked in the system, just like my title. It is over, I said. The sale is dead. The buyers are going to walk. The only thing left is to see how much damage you have done to yourselves. My father straightened his jacket. He tried to summon one last shred of dignity. We will explain. It was a misunderstanding. The authorities will see that. It is a domestic dispute. They won't prosecute parents for trying to help their child. It stopped being a domestic dispute when you walked into a law office, I said. Now it is white-collar crime. I looked at the door. I knew who was coming. I had felt the inevitability of it since the moment I saw the lock on the screen. The system does not like to be mocked. The system does not like forged seals. The system reacts. You should sit down, Mother, I said. Why? She sniffled, looking up. Because, I said, gesturing to the heavy wooden door of the office suite. At that exact moment, there was a sound. It was not a ring. It was not a buzzer. It was a knock. 3 hard, distinct raps on the heavy wood. Thud, thud, thud. It was the sound of authority. It was the sound of consequences arriving. It was the sound of the world outside breaking into our hermetically sealed drama. Pierce looked at the door. He swallowed hard. Come in, he called out, his voice cracking. The handle turned. The latch clicked. The door began to open, and with it, the fiction of the Foster family finally let in the cold, hard light of the law. The woman who walked through the door of Martin Pierce's office did not look like she belonged in a law firm. She did not wear a suit. She wore a dark gray windbreaker with a county emblem embroidered on the chest, tactical cargo pants, and heavy rubber-soled boots that made no sound on the plush carpet. She held a tablet in one hand and a digital voice recorder in the other. She did not smile. She did not apologize for the interruption. She scanned the room with eyes that had seen 1,000 desperate people try to lie their way out of a felony, and she dismissed us all as data points before she even spoke. Elena Marquez, she said, her voice dry and stripped of inflection. Senior investigator, Riverton County Recorder's Office, Fraud Unit. She held up a badge. It was silver, encased in leather, and it authorized her to seize documents and freeze assets. "Who is the attorney of record?" she asked. Martin Pierce stepped forward. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "I am Martin Pierce," Marquez nodded once. She walked past my parents without looking at them and placed the voice recorder on the desk, right next to the scanner. She pressed the record button. A tiny red light began to blink. "Time is 2:45 p.m., she stated for the record. "Location is the law offices of Caldwell and Pierce. Present are attorney Martin Pierce, 2 unidentified subjects, and," she turned to me, "you are the property owner." "Yes," I said. "Ruby Foster." "ID," she said. I opened my bag, took out my driver's license, and handed it to her. She looked at it, looked at my face, and then typed something into her tablet. "Identity verified," she muttered. She handed the card back to me, then she turned to the stack of papers that Pierce had just scanned. "Are these the originals?" "Yes," Pierce said. "I have secured them." Marquez picked up the power of attorney. She held it by the corner. As if it were a contaminated specimen, she didn't read the text. She looked immediately at the bottom of the page, at the signature and the stamp. "Ruby Foster," Marquez said, looking at me. "Did you sign this document authorizing the sale of Unit 2201, Glasswater Heights?" "No," I said. "Did you authorize anyone to sign on your behalf?" "No." "Were you present for a notarization on January 15th, 2026? "No." "Did you intend to sell this property today?" "No," I said. "I came home and found a realtor showing it to buyers. I did not hire the realtor." Marquez nodded. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look sympathetic. She just tapped the screen of her tablet. "Attorney Pierce," she said. She turned to him. "Did you prepare this instrument?" Pierce swallowed. "My office prepared the draft based on instructions from the parents, Mr. and Mrs. Foster." "Did you witness the signature?" Marquez asked. The question was a guillotine blade hovering over his neck. The room was silent. My father was staring at Pierce, his eyes pleading for a lifeline, for a lie that could save them both. But Pierce knew the red light on the recorder was blinking. He knew the penalties for perjury. "No," Pierce said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I did not witness the signature. The document was returned to me already signed and notarized." "By whom?" "By Scott Foster," Pierce said. Gesturing to my father, Marquez turned to my father. For the first time, she acknowledged his existence. She looked at him not as a father, not as a wealthy man in a suit, but as a suspect in a chain of custody. "Name," she asked. "Scott Foster," my father said. His voice was loud, aggressive. "And this is ridiculous. I am her father. I have handled her financial affairs for years. This is a family dispute. You have no jurisdiction here." "I have jurisdiction over every document recorded or attempted to be recorded in this county," Marquez said calmly. "And forgery is not a family dispute. It is a Class 4 felony." She looked back at the document. "The notary stamp, Sarah J. Miller, commission number 202-24591. She pulled out a phone from her pocket. It wasn't a personal phone. It was a ruggedized government-issue device. She dialed a number from her tablet. She put it on speaker and held it out over the desk. We all listened to the ring. Burring, burring. My mother was shaking her head back and forth, a silent rhythm of denial. My father was staring at the phone as if he could will it to disconnect. "Hello, this is Sarah," a voice answered. It sounded young, cheerful, accompanied by the background noise of a coffee shop or a playground. "Ms. Miller," Marquez said. "This is Investigator Marquez from the County Recorder's Office. I am on a recorded line." The background noise on the other end seemed to stop. "Oh, okay. Is something wrong?" "I am looking at a general power of attorney dated January 15th, 2026, bearing your notary seal and signature. The grantor is Ruby Foster. Did you notarize this document?" There was a pause. Ruby Foster, I don't know a Ruby Foster. Did you notarize anything on January 15th? No, Sarah Miller said. I was in Cabo for my sister's wedding all last week. I didn't work at all. My stamp was in my desk drawer at home. Thank you, Marquez said. One more question. When does your commission expire? It expired last month, Sarah Miller said. December 31st, 2025. I haven't renewed it yet because I'm changing jobs. Why is someone using my stamp? We are investigating that now, Marquez said. Thank you. Ms. Miller, we may need a formal statement later. She ended the call. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The cheerful voice of the real Sarah Miller had stripped away the last layer of my parents' defense. They hadn't just fudged a date. They had stolen a stamp or made one and used the name of a real person who had no idea she was being framed as an accomplice. My mother made a sound like a balloon losing air. She slumped forward, putting her face in her hands. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, Scott." My father's face was dark red. He looked trapped. He looked at me, then at Pierce, then at Marquez. He decided to double down. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, pointing a finger at the phone. "That girl is mistaken. Or there is another Sarah Miller. We used a mobile service. Maybe the guy who came out had a fake stamp. We were scammed. We are the victims here." Marquez looked at him. Her expression did not change. She did not blink. "Mr. Foster," she said. "The commission number on the stamp matches the woman I just called. And mobile notaries do not carry expired stamps belonging to other people unless they are committing fraud. And you just told your attorney that you handled the signing." "I didn't know," my father shouted. "I thought it was valid. I'm not a lawyer. I just wanted to help my daughter." "No," Marquez said. She dropped the word like a stone. "This is not a mistake. This is a method. We see this 5 times a week. A family member in debt, a property with equity, a fake stamp ordered online for $20. You didn't get scammed. You prepared a deed transfer. You hired a realtor. You pushed for a same-day cash close. Those are the mechanics of equity stripping." She picked up the power of attorney and slid it into a clear plastic evidence bag she had pulled from her pocket. She sealed it with a sharp zip. "Attorney Pierce," she said, "you are now the custodian of the remainder of this file. You will scan every email, every draft, and every phone log associated with this transaction. You will provide them to my office by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Do not let these 2 individuals leave with anything. Do not let them delete anything." "Understood," Pierce said. He looked sick. "I am securing the building," Marquez continued. "I have a deputy in the lobby. No one leaves until I have full identification and statements." My mother looked up. Her mascara smeared, her eyes wide with horror. "A deputy. Are we arrested?" "Not yet," Marquez said. "That is for the district attorney to decide. Right now, I am just stopping the theft." She turned to me. Her eyes softened. Just a fraction of a millimeter. It was the professional courtesy one combatant offers another. "Ms. Foster," she said, "you stopped this just in time. If that deed had been recorded, even with a fake stamp, it would have taken 6 months and $30,000 in legal fees to unwind. The buyers would have sued you. The bank would have called the note." "I know," I said. "That is why I'm here." "Good," she said. "You need to change your locks. Today, you need to change your passwords, all of them, and you need to check your credit reports." "I will," I said. My father was vibrating with rage. He couldn't scream at the investigator, so he turned his venom on me. "You happy now?" he hissed. "You got the cops involved. You think this makes you smart? You just destroyed your mother. Look at her." I looked at my mother. She was weeping, rocking back and forth, but it wasn't the weeping of a mother who had lost a child. It was the weeping of a child who had been caught stealing candy. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry the trick didn't work. "I didn't destroy her," I said calmly. "The evidence did." "You are cold," he spat. "You are ice cold." "I am accurate," I said. Marquez was typing on her tablet again. ignoring the domestic drama. She was processing the case number, linking the evidence bag to the file. Suddenly, her tablet made a sound. Ping, ping. It was a sharp, urgent alert tone, different from the previous notifications. Marquez frowned. She stopped typing. She looked at the screen. Her eyebrows pulled together. She looked up at me. Then she looked at her screen again. She swiped left, expanding the alert. "Ms. Foster," she said. Her voice had changed. The bureaucratic monotone was gone, replaced by a sharper, more urgent edge. "Do you own any other property in Riverton County?" "No," I said. "Just the penthouse." "Do you have a second mortgage? A home equity line of credit?" "No," I said. "I have a primary mortgage with Chase. That is it." Marquez turned the tablet around so I could see it. "Then explain this," she said. I looked at the screen. It was a live feed from the clerk's intake queue. It showed a document that had been flagged by the same automated system that caught the sale, but this one was different. Document type, Deed of Trust/HELOC, Grantor. Ruby. Elena Foster. Amount $200,000, lender, Shadow Creek Holdings, LLC. Status, pending recording. "What is that?" I whispered. "That," Marquez said, "is a second lien. Someone isn't just trying to sell your house, Miss Foster. Someone is trying to borrow against it. This was submitted electronically 20 minutes ago." "But my parents are here," I said, looking at them. "They couldn't have submitted it. They are standing right here." Marquez looked at the timestamp. 20 minutes ago, while we were arguing about the sale. She looked at my father. "Who else has your daughter's personal information? Who else has her social security number? Who else has a copy of her ID?" My father looked genuinely confused. "Nobody. It was just us. We just wanted to sell the condo." Marquez looked at me. "Is there anyone else, a partner, a spouse?" I felt the blood drain from my face. The room seemed to tilt. "My husband," I said. "Philip. Where is he?" Marquez asked. "He is at work," I said. "He is an architect. He doesn't know about this. He loves me." Marquez didn't answer. She just looked at the screen, then at me. "The filing IP address." She read from the tablet. "It is not a residential address. It is coming from a commercial server. Downtown." She tapped a button to trace it. 500 West Main Street. She read. "Suite 400. My knees almost gave out. I had to grab the edge of Martin Pierce's desk to stay upright. "That is his office," I whispered. "That is Philip's firm." Marquez looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the final, brutal truth that I had been too blind to see. My parents were the blunt instrument. They were the distraction. They were the ones making noise in the lobby while someone else picked the lock at the back door. "It seems," Marquez said, her voice dropping to a grim professional register, "that this conspiracy is not limited to the people in this room." She picked up her radio. "Dispatch, I need a second unit at 500 West Main. Possible fraud in progress. And get me the contact for the FBI Cyber Task Force. We have a multi-layered attack." I stood there, the noise of the room fading away. My parents' betrayal was expected. It was a known variable. But Philip, who kissed me goodbye this morning, Philip, who said he hated how my family treated me. The investigator looked at me. "Ms. Foster, we need to freeze everything. Now." I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the money anymore. I was thinking about the man I slept next to, and wondering if his touch had just been another form of forgery. The second alert on Investigator Marquez's tablet was not just a notification. It was a weapon. It sat there on the screen, pulsing with a dull, digital insistence, transforming the room from a scene of familial betrayal into a crime scene of calculated identity theft. "A HELOC," Marquez said, her voice cutting through the thick, suffocating air of the office. "Home equity line of credit. They are not just trying to sell the penthouse. Ms. Foster, they are trying to drain the equity out of it while you are still living there." I stared at the screen. The application was for $200,000. It was a fast cash product. the kind advertised on late-night television, designed for people who needed liquidity within 48 hours. "I never applied for this," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "I don't need a loan. I have excellent liquidity." "The lender is Shadow Creek Holdings," Marquez read, scrolling down. "They are a hard money lender, high interest, low documentation, but even low documentation requires the basics. They have your social security number, Ms. Foster, the last 4 digits, certainly, but likely the full 9 for the credit pull. They have a scan of your driver's license, and they have a specimen of your signature." I looked at my parents. My mother was still weeping into her hands, but my father was looking at the tablet with a confusion that felt genuine. He knew about the sale. He knew about the forgery in this room, but the HELOC. He looked like a man who had realized there was a second shark in the water, and he didn't know who it was. "I didn't do that," Scott Foster said, his voice shaking. "We just wanted to sell. I don't know who Shadow Creek is." Marquez ignored him. She looked at me. "Who has access?" "Ruby. To apply for this, they needed physical access to your documents or a very high-quality digital compromise. Think about your apartment. Think about your patterns." "I live alone," I said. "My files are in a fireproof safe. The key is on my ring." "What about your mail?" Marquez asked. "New credit cards, bank statements, tax documents." "My mail goes to a locked box in the lobby," I said. "Only residents have keys." "And who has a spare key?" The question hung in the air. "My mother," I whispered. I turned to look at Diane Foster. She froze. The sobbing stopped instantly, replaced by the deer-in-headlights look of someone who realizes their small sins have opened the door for a catastrophe. "I gave you a spare key set 2 years ago," I said. "For emergencies. It had the apartment key, the elevator fob, and the mailbox key." "I never touched your mail," she stammered. "I only used the fob to bring the realtor up." Marquez didn't wait for a confession. She pulled out her radio again. "Dispatch, patch me through to Glasswater Heights Security. I need a log check on the lobby cameras for the mailroom." She waited. The silence was excruciating. My father was pacing again, but his movements were jerky, uncoordinated. He was losing control of the narrative. "This is Investigator Marquez," she said into the radio. "I am investigating a fraud case involving Unit 2201. I need to know if anyone other than the resident has accessed mail slot 2201 in the last 30 days. Check the key logs if you have an electronic system, or the camera feeds." We waited 2 minutes, 120 seconds of my mother picking at a loose thread on her dress. The radio crackled. "Investigator, we have footage from January 4th, January 9th, and January 12th. An older female, blonde hair, blue coat. She used a key to open the box. On the 12th, she removed 3 envelopes." I looked at my mother. "January 12th, I said. "That was the day my bank statements usually arrive." "I was just checking," she cried out. "I wanted to see if you had any big bills. I wanted to see if you could afford to help Blair. I didn't steal them, I put them back the next day." "You took them out of the building," Marquez noted, writing it down. "That is theft of mail, federal jurisdiction. But more importantly, you took them out long enough to scan them, or long enough for someone else to scan them." "I didn't scan them," she insisted. "I just showed them to Scott." "And who else saw them?" Marquez asked. "Did you leave them on the kitchen counter? Did you leave them in your car?" My mother's eyes darted sideways. It was a subtle movement, a flicker of evasion. She wasn't looking at my father. She was looking at the door. And then, as if summoned by her guilt, the door opened. Philip Morales walked in. My husband looked breathless. He was wearing his work suit, his tie slightly loosened, his hair windblown. He looked exactly like a concerned spouse who had rushed across town in the middle of a workday. "Ruby," he said, rushing toward me. He ignored Marquez. He ignored my parents. He grabbed my shoulders, his hands warm and firm. "Are you okay?" I got a weird call from the building security. They said there was police activity. For 5 years, Philip had been my safe harbor. He was the calm architect to my rigid auditor. He was the one person I trusted to not want anything from me other than my company. But right now, standing in the wreckage of my family, I felt a strange vibration when he touched me. It wasn't comfort. It was a data point. "I am fine," I said, not hugging him back. "There is a fraud investigation." Philip turned to look at the room. He saw my parents sitting in the corner, looking defeated. He saw the investigator with her badge. And then he looked at Martin Pierce. "Martin," Philip said, nodding at the lawyer. "Is this about the closing? Did something go wrong with the paperwork?" The question was casual. It was natural. And it was impossible. I had never told Philip the name of the lawyer my parents used. I had never told him the closing was happening today. I had told him I was dealing with a family emergency. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was far deeper than the anger I felt toward my parents. "I didn't tell you the closing was here, Philip," I said softly. He didn't flinch. He was smooth. "Your dad mentioned it," he said quickly. "When he called me last week, he said they were using the family firm, Caldwell and Pierce. Everyone knows them." It was a plausible lie. My father talked a lot, but my father didn't talk to Philip. They tolerated each other. My father thought Philip wasn't ambitious enough. Philip thought my father was a blowhard. They didn't have casual chats about legal representation. I looked at Marquez. She was watching Philip with the eyes of a hawk that has just spotted a mouse in the grass. She knew. She had traced the IP address to his office. She knew exactly who he was. But she didn't arrest him. She didn't say, "We traced the hack to your server." She waited. She was giving him rope. "Mr. Morales," Marquez said. "I am Investigator Marquez. We have a situation involving identity theft against your wife." "Identity theft?" Philip looked shocked. He turned to me. "Ruby, what did they take?" "They tried to sell the Penthouse," I said, watching his face. "And someone tried to take out a loan against it. A HELOC." "A HELOC?" Philip frowned. "That takes weeks. You have to get an appraisal." "Not with Shadow Creek Holdings," Marquez interjected. "They are a digital-first lender. They use automated valuation models. They can fund in 48 hours if you have the right documents." Philip nodded slowly. "That is terrifying. Who would do that?" "We are finding out," Marquez said. "Mr. Morales, since you are here, I need to ask, have you noticed any unusual activity on your home network? Any missing documents from your shared files?" "No," Philip said. "We keep everything secure. Ruby is obsessed with security." He gave a little laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "She shreds everything." "Right," Marquez said. She didn't smile. She turned back to me. "Ms. Foster, we need to execute a containment protocol immediately. This leak is active. Whoever is doing this has your profile. They can open credit cards. They can file for unemployment in your name. They can redirect your tax refund." She handed me a printed sheet from her folder. It was a checklist. "Step 1, she said. Credit freeze, not a lock, a freeze. You need to do it with Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Right now, on your phone. Do not leave this room until it is done." "Okay," I said, pulling out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I forced my thumbs to move. "Step 2, Marquez continued. "You need to change the locks on the Penthouse. Physical keys are compromised. I want you to switch to a high-security cylinder that cannot be duplicated at a hardware store, and revoke all existing elevator fobs. The building manager can recode your access to a new frequency. Do not let your mother keep a copy." My mother flinched as if I had slapped her. "Step 3, Marquez said, her voice relentless. "Set up a fraud alert with the county. Riverton has a system called Property Watch. You register your email. Anytime a document is scanned with your name or parcel number, you get a text message within 60 seconds. "I will do it," I said. I was logging into the credit bureaus. Freeze initiated. PIN created. Freeze initiated. "Step 4, Marquez said. Two-factor authentication. Change the passwords on your email and your bank accounts. And do not use SMS for the codes. If they have your personal info, they might try to SIM swap your phone. Use an authenticator app. Philip was standing next to me, watching me type. Do you want me to help? He asked. I can call the bank for you. No, I said. I will handle it. I didn't want him having my new passwords. The thought made me sick. This was the man I shared a bed with. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of thinking I was safe. My father, sensing that the attention had shifted away from him, saw an opening. He stood up and walked over to Philip. Philip, my father said, his voice booming with false camaraderie. You need to talk some sense into her. Tell these people. Tell them Ruby knew about the sale. Tell them we discussed it at dinner last month. Remember when we talked about Blair? He was trying to recruit Philip into the lie. He was desperate. He thought if the husband corroborated the story, the misunderstanding defense might still work. Philip looked at my father. Then he looked at me. It was a crucial moment, a crossroads. If Philip lied for them, he became a co-conspirator in the forgery. If he told the truth, he threw them under the bus. But Philip did neither. He stayed silent. He looked at my father with a blank, unreadable expression. He didn't say, yes, she knew. He didn't say, no, she didn't. He just stood there. The silence stretched out. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Philip, my father urged. Tell them. I think, Philip started, picking his words carefully. I think everyone is very upset right now. Maybe we should let the lawyers handle the details. Scott, it was a deflection, a non-answer. And in that non-answer, I saw the crack. If he was innocent, he would have said, Scott, she never agreed to this. He would have defended me. If he was fully on their side, he would have lied, but he was straddling the line. He was protecting himself. He didn't want to lie to an investigator, but he didn't want to anger the man who might be holding leverage over him. Marquez saw it too. She made a note on her pad. Mr. Foster, Marquez said, stop coaching the witnesses. That is tampering. I am not coaching, my father shouted. I am trying to get the truth out. The truth, I said, looking up from my phone, is that my credit is now frozen and my title is locked. So whatever game you were playing, it is over. I finished the last freeze. I felt a small click of satisfaction. The digital walls were up, but I still had one physical question to answer. I walked over to my mother. She was sitting in the chair, looking at her hands. She looked broken, but I knew Diane Foster. She broke easily, but she reassembled quickly. I stood right in front of her. I blocked her view of Philip. I blocked her view of Scott. It was just me and her. Mother, I said. She looked up. Her eyes were red. You said you took the mail, I said. You said you saw the bank statements. Yes, she whispered. But Shadow Creek Holdings didn't just have a bank statement, I said. They had a color scan of my passport and my driver's license, high resolution, front and back. I leaned down. I don't keep my passport in the mail. Mother, I keep it in the safe, and I don't carry it in my purse unless I'm traveling. I don't know, she stammered. Who gave you the scan? I asked. My voice was a scalpel. Did you break into my safe? You don't have the combination. No, I never touched the safe. Then how did the lender get my ID? I asked. Someone had to give it to them. Someone who had access to it digitally. I saw her eyes flick again. Not to the door this time. She looked past me. She looked at Philip. It was a micro-expression. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. She looked at Philip for help. She looked at Philip because she knew he had the file. Look at me, I commanded, snapping her attention back. Who gave you the file? She bit her lip. She looked down. I found it, she lied. Her voice was weak. I found a copy in your desk drawer when I was watering the plants. I took a picture of it. You are lying, I said. I don't have a desk drawer. I have a locked filing cabinet. She didn't answer. She just cried harder. I stood up. I didn't need her to say the name. Her eyes had already pointed the finger. My parents had provided the theater. They had done the open house. They had forged the signature on the sale deed because they were desperate and sloppy. But the HELOC, the digital application, the upload from a commercial IP address. That was Philip. My parents were trying to sell the house to save Blair, but Philip was trying to mortgage it to save himself. And the terrifying part was that they might be working together. "Investigator Marquez," I said, turning around. "I am ready to give a full statement, and I want to include a request for a subpoena." "For what?" Marquez asked. "For the internal access logs of my husband's architectural firm," I said, looking straight at Philip. Philip's face didn't move, but the color left it entirely. "Ruby," he said, "what are you doing?" "I am cleaning house," I said. "All of it." The coffee shop I chose for the meeting with my sister was called The Daily Grind. It was located 3 blocks from the county courthouse, a place filled with paralegals, tired jurors, and people who had nothing to hide. It was neutral ground, it was public, and most importantly, it was loud enough that if Blair started to scream, her voice would be drowned out by the hiss of espresso machines. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in a corner booth with a direct line of sight to the door. I ordered a black coffee and checked my phone. The Property Watch app was running in the background, a silent sentinel guarding what was left of my life. Blair arrived 12 minutes late. She looked like a rough draft of the person she used to be. Her hair, usually highlighted and blown out, was pulled back in a messy bun that hadn't been touched in 2 days. She was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, and her hands were shaking as she pulled out a chair. She didn't order a drink. She just sat down and looked at me with the wet, wounded eyes of a golden retriever that had just chewed up a sofa. "You look tired," I said. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation. "I am in hell, Ruby," she whispered. She leaned across the table, lowering her sunglasses to reveal dark circles that makeup couldn't hide. "You have no idea what it's like. The phone calls, the threats. They know where I work. They know where I park my car." "Who are they?" I asked. "Creditors," she said vaguely. "Investors. It's complicated." "Make it simple," I said. "You and Mom and Dad just tried to commit a Class 4 felony to pay these people off. If I am going to be the villain in your story, Blair, I want to see the receipt. How much is it, really?" Blair fumbled with her purse. She pulled out her phone, her fingers tapping frantically on the screen. It's about 180,000, maybe 200. It fluctuates with the interest." She shoved the phone in my face. I took it. I didn't look at her. I looked at the screen. It was a screenshot, not a live banking app, not a PDF statement, a screenshot. And it had been cropped. The top of the image, where the account holder's name and the date would be, was sliced off. The bottom, where the transaction details would be listed, was blurry. All I could see was a total balance in red negative $192,450. "This isn't proof," I said, handing the phone back. "This is a picture of a number. Who is the lender? Is this a credit card? A bank loan?" "It's a private consolidation," Blair said, snatching the phone back. "They bought my debt. Look, Ruby, I messed up. I tried to do some day trading. I thought I could flip some crypto and pay off my student loans. It went wrong. It all went wrong." I watched her face. She was lying, or rather, she was telling the version of the truth that she thought I would accept. Day trading was a respectable way to lose money. It sounded almost professional. But I worked in compliance. I worked for the Arbor Vale Compliance Group. My entire career was built on spotting the difference between bad luck and bad intent. "Show me the transaction history," I said. "Open the app, right now." "I can't," she said quickly. "I got locked out this morning because of the investigation. Mom said you froze everything." "I froze my credit," I said. "Not yours. Why would your trading app be locked because of my credit freeze?" She froze. The lie had hit a wall. "I don't know," she stammered. "It just is. Look, Ruby, please, I just need you to lift the hold, just for 24 hours. Mom said if we can just record the deed." The lenders will back off. They just need to see the asset is liquid. I went very still. Record the deed, I repeated. Yes, she said. Just get it on the books. Since when do you use the word record in relation to property titles? I asked. You are a yoga instructor. Blair, you don't talk about recording deeds. You talk about selling houses. She blinked, looking confused by my focus on her vocabulary. I don't know. Dad said it, or someone said it. It doesn't matter. The point is, everything was ready. It was almost done. We just needed the recording number to show the guys at Shadow Creek. Shadow Creek, I said. That's the hard money lender, the one Philip applied to. I don't know who Philip applied to, she cried, her voice rising. I just know they promised to consolidate everything if we had collateral. I sat back. The picture was getting sharper. Blair wasn't the mastermind. She was the desperate fuel. But the engine was running on a track I hadn't fully mapped yet. Blair, I said quietly, if you don't tell me exactly who told you to say record the deed, I am walking out of here, and I'm going to let Investigator Marquez subpoena your phone records. It was just a guy, she hissed. A consultant. He helps people with distressed assets. What is his name? I don't know. Dad talked to him. He calls himself the architect or something stupid on the forums. He said he could fix the paperwork problems. The architect. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Philip was an architect. It was too on the nose. It was too obvious. But criminals, especially arrogant ones, often hid in plain sight. I have to go, I said, standing up. Ruby, wait. Blair grabbed my wrist. Her grip was weak, clammy. You can't leave me like this. They are going to hurt me. Then go to the police, I said, pulling my hand away. But don't come to me. I'm not your bank anymore. I'm the auditor. I left her crying in the booth. I didn't look back. I had work to do. I drove straight to my office at Arbor Vale. It was a Saturday, so the building was empty. I needed the silence. I needed the dual monitors and the high-speed access to the databases that I used to hunt money launderers for Fortune 500 companies. I logged in. The fan of my computer whirred to life. I started with the obvious, my parents. I had access to their primary checking account because 5 years ago, when my father had a health scare, they added me as a signatory, just in case. They had probably forgotten. I hadn't touched it, but I hadn't removed myself either. I pulled the last 12 months of statements. I was looking for the bleed. If Blair owed $200,000, my parents had likely already thrown $50,000 or $60,000 at the problem before they got desperate enough to steal my house. I found it. It wasn't one lump sum. It was a slow hemorrhage. March 12th. $5,000 to Service Link LLC. April 4th. $8,500 to Global Consulting. May 20th. $12,000 cash withdrawal. I ran Service Link LLC through the State Business Registry. It was a shell. Registered agent was a generic mailbox store in Nevada, but the payment processor used for the transaction was a gambling gateway. Blair wasn't day trading. She was gambling, online casinos, high-stakes slots. The investments were likely Ponzi schemes she had fallen for in a desperate attempt to win back her losses. But then I saw a transfer that didn't fit the pattern. January 2nd. $15,000 to PM Design Services, PM, Philip Morales. My heart hammered against my ribs. My parents had sent $15,000 to a company that sounded like my husband's freelance side business. But Philip hadn't done freelance work in 3 years. I clicked on the transaction details. The account number for PM Design Services was not our joint account. It was an account I didn't recognize. I ran the routing number. It was a digital bank, a neobank, that allowed you to open accounts with minimal verification. I sat back, staring at the screen. My parents weren't just victims of Blair's debt. They were paying someone. They were paying an accomplice. Was it Philip? Or was someone using his initials to mock me? I needed to flush them out. I needed to know who was watching the system. I picked up my phone. I composed a text message to my mother. I knew she was probably with my father, and I knew they were likely huddled with whoever was guiding them, trying to figure out a plan B. Mom, I wrote, I am cooling down. I don't want to see Blair go to jail. I checked my portfolio. I have a storage unit in Boulder where I keep Grandma's silver and some art. It's not real estate, so it's not frozen. I might be willing to liquidate it to help, if you promise to leave the penthouse alone. I hit send. Then I waited. It was a trap. I didn't have a storage unit in Boulder. I didn't have Grandma's silver that had been sold years ago to pay for my father's business expansion. If they were just desperate parents, they would text back asking for details. But if they were working with a pro, someone who knew how to check assets, they wouldn't just text. They would run a search. I opened the public record database for Boulder County. I set up a watch filter for any inquiries under the name Ruby Foster or Foster Family Trust. 40 minutes passed. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across my office. Then, the alert came. Ping. Inquiry detected. Boulder County Clerk Recorder /UCC. Search term. Foster. Ruby. Search origin. Vive. PN node. Denver. I smiled. A cold, humorless smile. They hadn't just taken my word for it. They had immediately tried to verify the asset. They were looking for a UCC filing a lien search to see if the imaginary silver was encumbered. Normal parents don't know what a UCC search is. Normal parents don't use a VPN to hide their search location. Someone was driving the car, and they were looking for any unlocked door they could find. I needed physical evidence. I had the digital footprint, but I needed the smoking gun that linked the architect to my family. I left the office. I didn't go home. I went to the one place where sloppy people make mistakes. My parents' house. They were currently at the Hyatt Regency downtown. I knew this because my mother's Find My Friends location was still shared with me. Another thing she had forgotten to turn off. They were likely meeting with a criminal defense attorney, or perhaps just hiding from the shame of the neighbors. Their house in the suburbs was dark when I arrived. I still had my key. I hadn't revoked their access to my life until today, and they hadn't revoked mine because they didn't think I had the spine to invade their privacy. I let myself in. The house smelled of stale potpourri and denial. I went straight to the home office. It was a cluttered room, filled with my father's business ideas and my mother's crafting supplies. I didn't look at the computer. It was password protected, and I didn't have time to crack it. I looked at the printer. It was an old HP LaserJet, the kind that rumbled like a tank and lasted forever. My father never cleared the paper tray, and he never cleared the cache. I checked the output tray. Empty. I opened the recycling bin under the desk. It was full of shredded paper. My father had been busy, but he was lazy. I knew him. He shredded the documents that looked legal, but he often missed the drafts or the confirmation pages. I dug through the trash can. Underneath a layer of cross-cut shreds, I found a crumpled ball of paper. It wasn't shredded. It had been wadded up and thrown in anger. I smoothed it out on the desk. It was an email, printed from design_guru_88 Proton Mail. To Scott Foster, 1965, gmail.com. Date, January 14th, 2026, subject FW, affidavit template. Use this. I read the body of the email. Scott, the notary situation is tricky. If she doesn't show up, we use the owner unreachable clause. It is risky, but it works if you have the neighbor verify residency. Attached is the affidavit. Get the stamp. Don't worry about the commission number. The county clerk doesn't check against the state database in real time. Just get it recorded. Once it is in the system, we have 90 days before anyone notices. By then, the loan is funded and we are out. Design_guru_88. I stared at the email address. It was a generic pseudonym. It could be anyone. But then I looked at the bottom of the page. The footer that Gmail automatically adds when you print an email thread. Quoted text. On January 14th, 2026 at 10:30 a.m., Philip Morales, PMORALES, structure-arch.com, wrote, "Here's the file you asked for. Make sure you delete the metadata before you forward it." I don't want my firm's name on the properties. I stopped breathing. Philip hadn't sent the email to my father directly. He had sent it to design_guru_88, who had then forwarded it to my father. Philip was the source. He was the architect. He was providing the legal templates, the strategy, the technical know-how to bypass the county safeguards, and he had warned them to delete the metadata. Design_guru_88 had failed to delete the forwarded chain. I looked at the date. January 14th. 4 days ago. 4 days ago. Philip had sat across from me at dinner. He had poured me a glass of wine. He had asked me how my day was. He had held my hand while I complained about work. And all the while, he was emailing instructions to my father on how to steal my home. Why the why didn't matter right now. The how was in my hand. I took a photo of the crumpled paper. Then I carefully folded it and put it in my bag. This wasn't just evidence of fraud. This was evidence of conspiracy. I stood up to leave, but a sound stopped me. The front door opened. I froze. I was in the back office. If I moved, the floorboards would creak. "I told you I left it here." My father's voice drifted down the hallway. He sounded drunk. "I printed the damn thing, and then I couldn't find it." "Scott, we have to go." My mother's voice was shaking. "The lawyer said not to go back to the house." "I need that paper," he shouted. "If the cops find the email chain, they link us to him. He said we have to burn it." Him. They were talking about Philip, or the guru. They were coming down the hall. I had seconds. There was no back exit from the office. The window was painted shut. I slid under the heavy oak desk. It was a tight squeeze. I pulled my knees to my chest and held my breath. My father's heavy footsteps entered the room. I could see his shoes, expensive loafers, scuffed at the toe. He walked to the printer. He lifted the lid. He checked the tray. "It is not here," he muttered. "I swear I printed it." He kicked the trash can. The bin rattled. He didn't look inside. He assumed he had shredded it. "Scott," my mother called from the living room. "There is a car pulling up. It's a police car." My father froze. "Damn it!" He turned and ran out of the room. "Let's go out the back," he yelled. I heard the sliding glass door in the kitchen open and slam shut. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then I heard heavy pounding on the front door. "Police, open up." I crawled out from under the desk. I stood up and brushed the dust off my knees. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't the one running anymore. I walked down the hallway to the front door. I unlocked it and opened it. A young officer stood there, his hand resting near his holster. He looked surprised to see me. "Officer," I said calmly, "I am Ruby Foster. I believe you are looking for my parents. They just went out the back." The officer blinked. "Ms. Foster, Investigator Marquez has been trying to reach you." "I know," I said. "I found something she needs to see." I patted my bag where the crumpled paper lay. "And I know who the third man is." I returned to the penthouse not as a wife returning to her husband, but as an operative infiltrating a hostile site. The realization that Philip was the architect of my destruction did not result in a scream or a tear. It resulted in a terrifying glacial calm. Emotional reactions are variables. I needed constants. I needed evidence that was clean, admissible, and devastating. If I confronted him now with a crumpled email and an accusation, he would claim he was hacked. He would claim coercion. He would gaslight me until I questioned my own sanity. I needed the system to crush him. Not my words. I walked into the apartment. Philip was in the living room, staring at his laptop. He looked up, his face arranging itself into a mask of concern. "Ruby," he said, standing up. "Where were you? I was worried. Your parents, the police, called me. They said there was a disturbance at their house." "I know," I said. "I went to see them. They ran." "They ran?" Philip shook his head, a performance of disbelief that deserved an award. "Jesus, this is getting out of hand. Ruby, maybe we should just step back. Let the lawyers handle it. You look exhausted." I am fine, I said. I walked past him to the kitchen. I just need to organize the paperwork. The investigator needs a clean timeline. I poured a glass of water, my back to him. I could feel his eyes on me. He was assessing the threat level. He needed to know how much I knew. Did the investigator find anything else? He asked casually. Just the forgery. I lied. And the attempt on the HELOC. She thinks it is an identity theft ring. Some overseas hackers using my parents as mules. I heard him exhale. It was a microscopic sound, but in the silence of the penthouse, it was a thunderclap of relief. He bought it. He thought I was still looking outward, not inward. That makes sense, he said. Your parents are well. They aren't tech-savvy. They probably clicked on a phishing link. Probably, I said. I went into the bedroom and closed the door. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my personal tablet. I connected to a secure VPN. Bypassing the home network entirely, I sent a message to Elena Marquez. I have the link. It is Philip. I need to build the wall before we fire the cannon. Can we meet with the DA tomorrow morning? Her reply came 3 minutes later. 0800 hours. Side entrance. Bring everything. The meeting with the assistant district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Jenkins, was brief and brutal. We sat in a conference room that smelled of floor wax and stale decisions. Marquez laid out the physical evidence, the forged power of attorney, the fake notary stamp, the camera footage of my mother at the mailbox. I laid out the digital trail, the screenshot of Blair's cropped bank balance, the transfer records to Philip's shell account, and the photo of the crumpled email I had retrieved from my father's trash. This is good, Jenkins said, tapping the photo of the email, but it is circumstantial. A defense attorney will argue your father printed a forwarded email from a third party who spoofed your husband's address. We need to prove origin. I can get the origin, I said. How? Jenkins asked. Metadata, I said. The power of attorney document that Martin Pierce has. It wasn't a scan of a paper document. My father emailed the digital file to Pierce to print. That file has a birth certificate. It has an author tag. It has a creation timestamp. Pierce is terrified, Marquez noted. He will give us anything we want to save his license. Get the native file, Jenkins ordered. If the author tag says Philip Morales or links to a software license registered to his firm, we have him on conspiracy and wire fraud. I will handle Pierce, I said. And Ruby, Jenkins added, looking at me with serious eyes. You need to secure your perimeter. If Philip realizes you are moving against him, he will destroy the devices. We need those laptops intact. He won't destroy them, I said cold. Because he thinks he is smarter than me. He thinks I am just the bank. I left the courthouse and sat in my car. I had one loose end to tie up before I set the final trap. Tessa Grant, the realtor. She was the unwitting pawn, but she was also a witness who could place my parents at the scene of the crime with intent. I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. This is Tessa. Tessa, it is Ruby Foster. There was a silence on the line so profound I could hear her breathing. Ms. Foster, she stammered. I have been trying to reach your parents. I heard there was a legal issue. There is not a legal issue. Tessa, I said. There is a felony investigation. The police have seized the listing agreement. The county has locked the title, and right now, your name is on the bottom of a fraudulent contract. I didn't know, she cried. Your mother told me she had the power of attorney. She showed me the file. I believe you, I said. But the licensing board might not, unless what? Unless you send me a written statement right now, detailing exactly how the listing happened. I want to know who called you first. I want to know who gave you the keys. And most importantly, I want to know if my husband, Philip Morales, was ever present at any of the meetings. Your husband, she asked, confused. No, I never met him. But what? Your father mentioned him, she said. At the initial walkthrough, your father was on the phone with someone about the staging. He hung up and said, Philip says we need to stage the office as a nursery. It sells better. I closed my eyes. A nursery. We didn't have children. We had discussed it, but Philip always said we weren't ready financially. Yet here he was, advising my father to stage a non-existent nursery to sell my home faster. Write that down, I said, word for word. Send it to my lawyer within the hour, or I will personally file the complaint with the Real Estate Commission. I'm doing it right now, she promised. Now came the difficult part. The theater. I needed my parents to come out of hiding. I needed them to attempt to finalize the crime so the police could catch them in the act of transmission. And I needed Philip to feel safe enough to keep his devices running. I drove to a burner phone shop, a small electronics repair store in the strip mall. I bought a cheap prepaid phone. I sent a text to my mother. Mom, I saw the police report. They're talking about jail time. I can't do that to you. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want this to stop. If I sign the papers legally, can we make the investigation go away? It was the bait they were desperate for. The narrative of the soft daughter, the one who valued peace over justice. The reply came in 10 seconds. Oh, Ruby. Thank God. Yes, if you sign, it becomes a consensual sale. The fraud charges drop because there is no victim. We are at the Motel 6 on the highway. Please, come save us. I didn't reply. I let them sweat. Then I went home to Philip. It was Tuesday evening. He was cooking dinner. Risotto. He looked the part of the perfect, supportive husband. Hey, he said, kissing my cheek. How was the lawyer? It is a mess, I said, putting my bag down. Martin Pierce is stepping down. The bank is freezing the accounts, but I hesitated. I needed to sell this. But what? He asked, stirring the rice. I might just sign, I said. To end it. If I sign the deed now, the fraud hold lifts, the sale goes through, the debt gets paid, and my parents don't go to prison. Philip stopped stirring. He turned to me. His eyes were wide, trying to mask the greed with relief. Ruby, he said, are you sure that is your apartment, your equity? It is just money. Philip, I said, echoing the words my father had used. I can make more money. I can't make a new family. He walked over and hugged me. I let him. I felt his heart beating against my chest. It was a steady, calm rhythm, the rhythm of a sociopath who thought he had won. You are a saint, he whispered into my hair. You are better than they deserve. If you want to do this, I support you. I can help you review the papers tonight. We can make sure they don't screw you over on the terms. That would be great, I said. But I have a problem. What? My laptop, I said. I think the investigator put some kind of tracking software on it, or maybe it is a virus. It is acting weird. Can I use yours to print the new draft? Martin sent it to my email, but I'm afraid to open it on my machine. It was the test. If he was innocent, he would hand me his laptop without a thought. If he was guilty, his laptop was the murder weapon. It contained the chat logs, the VPN software, the raw files of the forged notary stamp. Philip pulled back. His smile stayed fixed, but his eyes went hard. My laptop is actually at the office, he lied. I forgot to bring it home. I looked at his bag by the door. The outline of his MacBook was clearly visible in the leather. Oh, I said. I thought I saw you using it earlier. No, that was my iPad, he said quickly. And the battery is dead. Just use your phone. Ruby, it is safer. Okay, I said. I will use my phone. I had my answer. He wasn't just helping them. He was running the operation from that machine, and he was terrified I would see what was on it. Wednesday morning, the day of the signing. I had arranged to meet my parents not at a law office, but at the Penthouse. I told them I wanted to say goodbye to the home before I sold it. Philip insisted on coming. To protect you, he said. We stood in the living room. The morning light flooded the space, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My parents arrived at 10 a.m. They looked haggard. My mother was wearing the same dress she had worn 3 days ago. My father looked 10 pounds lighter. Ruby, my mother sobbed, rushing to hug me. I stepped back. "Do not touch me," I said. "Just put the papers on the table." My father laid out the fresh folder. "This is the clean version," he said. "No notary yet. You sign it here. We take it to the bank, get it notarized legitimately, then we record it. The fraud hold disappears." "And the money?" I asked. "The $950,000. "It goes to the title company," he said. "They pay off Blair's creditors. The rest comes to you. We promise." "What about the fees?" Philip asked, stepping forward. He picked up the contract. He was pretending to read it, but I saw his eyes scanning for the wire instructions. "We need to make sure the wire instructions are for Ruby's account. Scott, not yours." "Of course," my father said. "We aren't thieves." "You are thieves," I said. "You are just bad at it." I looked at Philip. "Is it good? Should I sign?" Philip looked at me. "It looks standard. Ruby, if this keeps them out of jail, I think you should do it." I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the signal. "Actually," I said, putting the pen down, "I have one question before I sign." "What?" my father asked, his eyes glued to the pen. "I want to know about the nursery," I said. The room went silent. "What nursery?" my mother asked. "The nursery Philip told you to stage," I said. "In the office." My father frowned. He looked at Philip. I never told you that." "Yes, you did," I said. "Tessa Grant told me. She said you got off the phone with Philip and told her to stage a nursery." Philip laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Ruby, honey, you are confused. I never spoke to your father about staging." "Really?" I asked. "Because I have the call logs. I didn't have the call logs yet, but Philip didn't know that." "And," I continued, reaching into my bag, "I have this." I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't the contract. It was a forensic report from the District Attorney's Digital Crimes Unit. Martin Pierce had delivered the original power of attorney file at 8:00 a.m. this morning. "This is the metadata report for the forged power of attorney," I said, reading from the page. "Philanami Foster _POA_final _V2.pdf, author PM_admin, software license Adobe Acrobat Pro, registered to Structure Architecture, user Philip Morales." I looked up. Philip's face had gone the color of ash. "You didn't just scan it, Philip," I said. "You created it. You built the forgery on your work computer. You inserted the fake stamp, and then you emailed it to my father to print." My parents were staring at Philip. They looked genuinely shocked. Not because he was involved, they knew that, but because he had been caught so completely. "You told us it was untraceable," my father shouted at Philip. "You said you scrubbed the file." "Shut up, Scott," Philip snapped. The loving husband mask vanished, his face twisted into a snarl. "You idiot. You printed the wrong version. I told you to use the flat PDF, not the editable one." "So you admit it," I said. Philip turned to me. "Ruby, listen, we can fix this. We can sell the place, pay everyone off, and go to Europe. Nobody has to know. I did it for us. We needed the capital. My firm is going under. Ruby, I owe money too." "For us?" I asked. "You tried to take a HELOC out in my name behind my back. That wasn't for us. That was for you to run away. I was going to pay it back." He yelled. "No," I said. "You aren't." I walked over to the console table near the elevator. I pressed the intercom button. "Investigator Marquez," I said. "You can come up now?" The elevator dinged immediately. It had been holding on the floor below. The doors slid open. Elena Marquez stepped out. Behind her were two uniformed officers and Sarah Jenkins from the DA's office. "Philip Morales," Marquez said, walking straight toward him with handcuffs in her hand. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery." Philip looked at the window, then at the elevator. There was nowhere to go. "And Scott and Diane Foster," Marquez added, turning to my parents. "You are under arrest for conspiracy and grand larceny." "Ruby!" my mother screamed, reaching for me. "Don't let them take us. We are your parents." I stood still. I watched the officer cuff my mother's hands behind her back. I watched another officer push my father against the wall to pat him down. And I watched Philip, the man I had vowed to love and cherish, being read his Miranda rights in the middle of the living room he had tried to steal. "I am not the victim anymore," I said to the empty room as they dragged them out. "I am the witness." I looked at the table where the contract lay unsigned. I picked up the pen and capped it. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The glass reflected my face. I looked different. Older. Maybe. Harder. Certainly. But the title was safe, and for the first time in a week, the silence in the penthouse was real. The fallout from the arrests was not silence. It was a cacophony. You might think that seeing your husband and parents led away in handcuffs would bring a certain finality to the trauma, like the closing credits of a movie. But the American legal system does not work that way. It is slow, grinding, and porous. Within 24 hours, my parents and Philip had posted bail. White-collar crime, especially for first-time offenders with strong community ties, rarely keeps people behind bars before trial. They walked out of the county jail, and the war moved from the sphere of criminal law to the court of public opinion. My phone began to vibrate at 6 a.m. on Thursday. It started with a text from my Aunt Judy, a woman who usually only messaged me to wish me a happy birthday or to solicit donations for her cat rescue. "How could you? Your mother is in the hospital with stress-induced angina. You have broken her heart. Call me." Then came the Facebook notifications. I didn't use Facebook often, but my notifications were blowing up. My mother had not posted a confession. She had posted a vague, weeping selfie with a caption about betrayal and ungrateful children and sacrificing everything for family only to be stabbed in the back. She didn't mention the forgery. She didn't mention the theft. She framed it as a dispute over money, a wealthy, cold-hearted daughter refusing to help a desperate sister, leading to a misunderstanding with the police. Blair was even worse. She went live on Instagram. I watched the replay with a sort of morbid fascination. She was crying, no filter, talking about how she was being persecuted by a system that criminalized poverty. She didn't mention the online gambling. She didn't mention the $200,000 she had blown. She just painted a picture of herself as a victim of a predatory economy and a sister who cared more about her penthouse view than her own flesh and blood. The narrative was taking hold. To the outside world, I was the villain. I was the Scrooge. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't comment on the posts. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I drove to the courthouse and filed a temporary restraining order. It was a cold, calculated move. By filing for protection, I wasn't just keeping them away physically. I was creating a legal record of their harassment. I attached the screenshots of the smear campaign not as proof of defamation, but as proof of their attempts to influence a witness me. Investigator Marquez met me at the clerk's window. She looked tired but satisfied. "Smart move," she said, looking at the TRO application. "If they contact you now, their bail gets revoked. Silence is your best weapon." "They are trying to make me look like a monster," I said. "Let them," Marquez said. "Juries don't care about Facebook likes. They care about metadata." She handed me a subpoena copy. "We have the hearing with the Real Estate Commission at 10. Tessa Grant is testifying. You should be there. It helps to have the victim in the room." The hearing was held in a beige conference room in the State Regulatory Building. Tessa Grant sat at the head of the table, flanked by her own attorney. She looked terrified. Her license, her livelihood, hung by a thread. When she saw me walk in, she flinched. I sat in the back row, silent, my hands folded in my lap. The commissioner asked her a simple question. "Ms. Grant, who directed the listing of Unit 2201? Tessa leaned into the microphone. "Scott and Diane Foster." "Did they present proof of ownership?" "They presented a power of attorney," Tessa said, her voice shaking. I asked for the owner. They said she was unavailable. They said she was emotionally fragile and couldn't handle the transaction. Did you ever speak to the owner? No, Tessa admitted. But I spoke to the husband. The room went quiet. Philip Morales? The commissioner asked. Yes, Tessa said. He called me on January 10th. He asked about the staging. He told me specifically to make the third bedroom look like a nursery. He said, Ruby is sentimental, but buyers need to see potential family space. He was very charming. He acted like he was managing the sale from behind the scenes to help his in-laws. I wrote that down. Philip directed the staging. It was another nail in his coffin. He wasn't a passive observer. He was the director. After the hearing, I went to Martin Pierce's office. The doors were no longer locked, but the receptionist looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. Pierce came out immediately. He didn't offer me coffee. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. Ruby, he said, I am drafting the affidavit now. I am stating for the record that I was deceived by the Fosters. I don't care about your feelings. Martin, I said, I care about the chain of custody. I placed a document on his desk. It was a rigorous, itemized timeline of every interaction he had had with my father and Philip regarding my property. Sign this, I said. It confirms you never verified my identity. It confirms you received the digital file from Philip's email address. It confirms you noticed the notary stamp date discrepancy, but failed to act until I pointed it out. He read it. His hands shook. Ruby, this admits to professional negligence. The Bar Association will suspend me. If you sign it, you are a negligent witness helping the prosecution, I said. If you don't sign it, you are a co-conspirator who facilitated a felony. Take your pick. He signed it. He stamped it. He handed me the original. I am sorry, he whispered. You are only sorry because the check bounced, I said. I left his office with the affidavit. 2 down, 1 to go. Philip, he had been texting me nonstop since he made bail. Ruby, please, we need to talk. I am at the Marriott. I didn't know the extent of it. Your dad used me. He told me it was legal. Please, let me explain. I agreed to meet him, not alone. I brought my own attorney, a sharp-edged litigator named David Thorne, whom Marquez had recommended for the civil side of things. We met in a private conference room at the hotel. Philip walked in looking disheveled, wearing the same suit he had been arrested in. He tried to rush toward me, arms open. Ruby, David Thorne stepped in between us. Mr. Morales, you will sit on that side of the table. You will not approach my client. Philip stopped. He looked hurt. He looked at me with those big, soulful eyes that had convinced me to marry him 5 years ago. Ruby, why is he here? Philip asked. We are husband and wife. We don't need lawyers. We are plaintiff and defendant, I said. Sit down. Philip sat. He clasped his hands on the table. Okay. Listen, I know how it looks. The email from my work account, Scott asked me to help him scan some documents. He said he didn't know how to use Adobe. I just forwarded what he gave me. I didn't look at the content, I swear. You didn't look at the content, I repeated. No, I was just being a good son-in-law. I didn't know it was a forgery until the police showed up. Then explain the money, I said. Philip blinked. What money? The $15,000, I said. Sent from my parents to PM Design Services on January 2nd, and the second transfer of $5,000 on January 14th, the day the fake power of attorney was created. Philip licked his lips. That was a loan. Scott owed me money for some architectural drawings I did for his warehouse renovation years ago. You haven't done freelance work in 3 years, I said. And why would he pay you the exact day the forgery was drafted? Coincidence, Philip insisted. Ruby, you are paranoid. I love you. Why would I steal from you? Because you are broke, I said. I ran a credit check on your firm. Philip, you are leveraged to the hilt. You have lost 3 major contracts in the last 6 months. You needed liquidity. You needed that HELOC. I didn't apply for the HELOC, he shouted. That was identity theft. Someone hacked me. Right, I said. Hackers who just happened to know exactly which hard money lender to use. I leaned forward. This was the moment. The trap. Philip, I said softly. The email I found in my father's trash. The one where the architect gave instructions. Do you remember what it said about the notary? I don't know what you are talking about, he said quickly. Too quickly. It said if the notary failed, you should use the affidavit. I lied. I hadn't shown him the email photo. I was testing him. What was the specific term the email used? Something about the owner being gone. Philip's eyes darted to the side. He was calculating. He thought if he got the term right, it would prove he had seen the email innocently. Or maybe he just slipped. The owner unreachable affidavit, he muttered. Scott mentioned it. He said the lawyer suggested an owner unreachable affidavit. I sat back. David Thorne wrote something down on his legal pad. Thank you, I said. For what? Philip asked, confusion clouding his face. For confirming you know what an owner unreachable affidavit is, I said. Because Martin Pierce never suggested that. That is not a standard legal tool in residential sales. It is a specific, obscure instrument used in quiet title actions for abandoned properties. No layperson knows that term. My father certainly doesn't, and Martin Pierce didn't suggest it. So, Philip challenged. I am an architect. I know property law. Exactly, I said. You know it. My father doesn't. You were the brain. Philip, you supplied the term. You supplied the strategy. Philip's face hardened. The mask dropped. The soulful eyes vanished, replaced by the cold, dead stare of a stranger. You think you are so smart, he sneered. You think you can just record everything and win. You are going to be alone, Ruby. Your parents hate you. Your sister hates you. And now you are divorcing me. You will have your penthouse, and you will have your money, and you will have absolutely no one to share it with. I am okay with that, I said. I prefer solitude to theft. We walked out. As we left the hotel, David Thorne turned to me. He is done. That slip-up with the affidavit proves specialized knowledge. The DA will love it. But the family wasn't done yet. Blair reached out the next day. She didn't text. She sent a courier with a handwritten note. Ruby, please. Mom is really sick. She might be having a heart attack. She is asking for you. Please meet me at the park near the hospital. Just 5 minutes. No lawyers. Just sisters. It was the oldest trick in the book, the medical emergency. I called the hospital. My mother was not admitted. There was no record of Diane Foster in the cardiac unit. It was a trap. Go, Marquez said when I called her. But wear this. She handed me a small pendant. It looked like a cheap necklace, but it was a high-fidelity microphone. They want to get you alone to emotionally blackmail you, Marquez said. Or maybe to get you to say something they can record to use against you. Let's flip the script. I met Blair at the park bench. She was alone. She looked small and pathetic, huddled in a coat that was too big for her. Where is Mom? I asked, sitting at the other end of the bench. She is at home, Blair admitted, not looking at me. She isn't in the hospital. I lied. It was the only way you would come. What do you want? Blair? I want you to drop the charges, she said. If you tell the DEA it was a misunderstanding, they will let it go. Ruby, please, I am pregnant. I looked at her stomach. It was flat. You are pregnant, I repeated. Yes, 6 weeks. I can't go to prison. I can't have a baby in jail. Who is the father? I asked. It doesn't matter. Look, just sign a non-prosecution affidavit. Say you gave us verbal permission and we just messed up the paperwork. That's all we need. And the $200,000? I asked. Does that just vanish? Philip said he could fix that. Blair blurted out. I froze. Philip, you talked to Philip. Yes, she cried. He called me this morning. He said if you drop the criminal case, he can liquidate some assets from his firm and pay off my debt. He has a plan. Ruby, he just needs time, but he can't do it if he is in prison. So Philip is offering to pay your gambling debt if I let him get away with fraud, I summarized. He is trying to help the family, Blair yelled. Unlike you are just standing there with your microphone. She stopped. She looked at my chest. She looked at the pendant. You are recording me, she whispered. Yes, I said. And you just confirmed that Philip is trying to bribe a witness you and orchestrate a cover-up. That is witness tampering. Blair, that is another felony. Blair stood up, her face twisted with pure, unadulterated hate. I hope you rot in that penthouse, she spat. I hope you choke on your money. At least it is my money, I said. I watched her stomp away. I felt a wave of exhaustion so heavy it almost crushed me. They were relentless. They were willing to use pregnancy, illness, and bribery to avoid the consequences of their own actions. I went back to the penthouse. It was finally over. I had the testimony. I had the affidavit. I had the confession. I sat down on the sofa and looked at the pile of mail that had accumulated while I was dealing with the chaos. I hadn't checked the physical mailbox in 3 days. I started sorting through it. Junk mail, utility bill, a flyer for a pizza place, and then a thick envelope from a collection agency. Titan Recovery Services. I frowned. I didn't have debt. I opened it. Inside was a notice of default. Outstanding balance. $45,200. Zero creditor. Sapphire Auto Finance. Collateral 2025. Range Rover Sport. Date of origination August 14th, 2025. I stared at the date. August 2025. 6 months ago. This wasn't part of the emergency sale to save Blair. This wasn't a panic move made last week. Someone had bought a Range Rover in my name 6 months ago. I looked at the applicant information on the copy of the contract attached to the notice. Ruby Foster. Cosigner, Philip Morales. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. This wasn't a desperate act of a failing architect. Philip had been using my name for months, maybe years. The Penthouse scheme was just the finale. He had been slowly bleeding me dry in the background, opening accounts I didn't know about, hiding the mail, intercepting the calls. My parents were the loud distraction. They were the clumsy thieves breaking the window. Philip was the termite eating the foundation. I picked up the phone. I didn't call the lawyer. I didn't call the investigator. I walked to the closet and pulled out the safe box where I kept my tax returns, the ones Philip had helpfully organized for me for the last 3 years. I opened the 2024 folder. The signature on the return wasn't mine. It was the same digital forgery from the power of attorney. He had been stealing from me since the day we got married. I sank to the floor. The collection notice in my hand. The locked status on the Penthouse wasn't a victory anymore. It was just the tip of the iceberg. I wasn't just fighting for my house. I was fighting for the last 5 years of my life, and I had just realized that every single day of it had been a lie. The courtroom was not dramatic. It was beige. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, and the air conditioning hummed with a monotonous, bureaucratic indifference. There were no gasps from a gallery, no wooden gavels banging for order. There was just the quiet, devastating sound of paper being shuffled. I sat behind the prosecutor, Sarah Jenkins, across the aisle, sitting at 3 separate tables because their defense attorneys had already turned on one another. Were my parents, my sister Blair, and my husband, Philip. My mother looked small. She had stopped dyeing her hair since the arrest, and the gray roots made her look 10 years older. My father stared at the table, refusing to lift his head. Blair was chewing her fingernail, her leg bouncing with a nervous energy that vibrated through the floor. And Philip sat straight, wearing a suit that was now slightly too large for him. He was taking notes on a yellow legal pad, still pretending he was an architect at a zoning hearing rather than a criminal defendant at a preliminary examination. The purpose of this hearing was to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to a full trial, but we all knew it was really the end of the line. The evidence investigator Marquez had compiled was not a theory. It was a mathematical equation. "Your Honor," Sarah Jenkins began, her voice calm and clipped, "the people contend that this was not a familial misunderstanding. This was a sophisticated, multi-layered conspiracy to commit grand larceny, wire fraud, and identity theft. The victims were the banking system, the county records department, and the property owner, Ruby Foster." My father's lawyer stood up first. He was a tired public defender who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Your Honor," he said, "Mr. and Mrs. Foster are elderly parents acting out of desperation to help a child. They believed they had implied consent from their daughter. This is a civil dispute that has been blown out of proportion." Jenkins didn't argue. She just put a document on the overhead projector. It was the owner unreachable affidavit. "If the defendants believed they had consent," Jenkins said, pointing to the screen, "why did they prepare a legal document specifically designed to bypass the owner?" This affidavit claims Ruby Foster could not be located. Yet, on the day this was drafted, cell phone tower records show Scott Foster and Ruby Foster were in the same city, and Philip Morales slept in the same bed as the victim. They didn't think she was unreachable. They needed her to be invisible. My mother put her head in her hands. The implied consent defense died in that silence. Then came the testimony of Tessa Grant. The realtor took the stand. Looking pale and shaken, she stated clearly, under oath, that my parents had presented themselves as having full, unchecked authority. She testified that they rushed the listing, asking for cash buyers only, specifically to avoid the deeper scrutiny of a mortgage underwriter. "And Mr. Morales?" Jenkins asked. "What was his role?" "He was the director," Tessa said, her voice trembling. "He told me how to stage the house. He told me to create a nursery. He told me that Ruby, the owner, was too emotional to be involved and that I should funnel all communication through her father." Philip stopped writing on his legal pad. He stared at Tessa with cold, reptilian eyes. Then came the pivot. The moment the rats started eating each other, Philip's lawyer, a sharp-suited man paid for by liquidating Philip's firm, stood up. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "Mr. Morales is a victim of his in-laws. He was manipulated by Scott Foster. My client merely scanned documents when asked. He had no knowledge of the forgery. He was trying to be a helpful son-in-law to a demanding patriarch." My father's head snapped up. "Liar," he hissed, loud enough for the stenographer to pause. Jenkins didn't flinch. She called Investigator Marquez to the stand. "Investigator," Jenkins said, "can you tell us about the origin of the power of attorney document?" "Yes," Marquez said. She held up a flash drive. "We seized the laptop of Philip Morales pursuant to a warrant. We analyzed the metadata of the file named Foster_POA_final_V2.pdf. And what did you find?" "The file was not created by a scanner," Marquez said. Her voice was devoid of emotion, just pure data delivery. "It was created using Adobe Acrobat Pro, licensed to Structure Architecture. The user log shows it was created at 11:30 at night on January 14th. She paused, looking directly at Philip. "At that time, Scott Foster was at his home, 5 miles away. Philip Morales was logged into the device. Furthermore, we found a folder on Mr. Morales' desktop labeled Project Ruby. Inside, we found high-resolution scans of the victim's passport, social security card, and driver's license." The courtroom went deadly silent. "Did Scott Foster provide those IDs?" Jenkins asked. "No," Marquez said. "The file creation dates on the IDs go back 3 years. Mr. Morales scanned his wife's identification documents 2 weeks after their wedding. He has been holding them in a secure folder ever since. He provided the kit to the parents. He provided the template. He provided the strategy." Philip closed his eyes. The helpful son-in-law narrative evaporated. He wasn't a helper. He was the supplier. He had been harvesting my identity since the honeymoon, waiting for the moment to cash me in. Philip's lawyer slumped in his chair. He knew it was over. You can argue against a witness. You cannot argue against a timestamp. Then, it was my turn. I did not have to testify, but I chose to provide a victim impact statement for the sentencing recommendation. I walked to the podium. I didn't look at my family. I looked at the judge. "Ms. Foster," the judge said, "the defense argues that this is a tragedy of errors, that there was no malice, only desperation." "It was not desperation," I said. My voice was steady. I was not the crying daughter anymore. I was the owner of the record. Desperation asks for a loan. Malice forges a signature. I placed a single document on the ledge of the witness box. "My husband claims he thought he had permission," I said. "My parents claim they thought I would agree, but I would like to submit this into evidence. It is a separate property agreement I signed and notarized 5 years ago, independently, which I filed with my own attorney, not Martin Pierce. It explicitly states that the penthouse is my sole and separate property, never to be commingled with marital assets." I turned to look at Philip. "I signed that because I grew up in a house where boundaries were violated," I said. "I signed that because I knew, deep down, that one day they would come for what was mine. They rely on the idea that I am weak. This document proves I was prepared." It was the final blow. It proved that their entire premise that I was a passive, pliable girl was false. I had been building my defenses while they were plotting their offense. Martin Pierce, my parents' former lawyer, was not in the defendant's chair, but his career was in a body bag. He had surrendered his license to practice law that morning in exchange for immunity from prosecution. His testimony had cemented the timeline. He admitted he had never spoken to me, that he had let my father bully him into bypassing the verification. He was a ruined man, but his ruin had served the truth. The judge looked at the files. He looked at the faces of my family. "The evidence is overwhelming," the judge said. "The fraud hold on the property is hereby lifted. The title is cleared and affirmed in the name of Ruby Elena Foster." Then came the sentences. Because they were first-time offenders, and because the sale was stopped before the money was transferred, my parents avoided prison. But the punishment was specific and humiliating. They were sentenced to 5 years of probation. They were ordered to pay restitution for the legal fees and the investigative costs. A permanent restraining order was granted, and most crushing for people who cared about appearances. The conviction for conspiracy to commit fraud would be a public record. They would never be able to serve on a board, hold a trustee position, or sign a legal document without that red flag. Blair was mandated into a gambling addiction program and ordered to pay restitution for the time wasted by the court. Her debt remained hers. The creditors would come for her, and this time, there was no Penthouse to save her. But Philip did not get probation. The metadata, the previous credit card fraud with the Range Rover, and the attempted HELOC application pushed him into a different category. He was a professional using his licensure to commit crimes. "Mr. Morales," the judge said, "you abused the trust of a spouse and the tools of your trade. You orchestrated this." He was sentenced to 24 months in a state correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised release. His architecture license was revoked immediately, as the bailiff moved to take him into custody. Philip looked at me. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked shocked. He looked like a man who had walked into a glass door he swore wasn't there. "Ruby," he mouthed. I didn't mouth anything back. I turned my back on him and walked out of the courtroom. 2 hours later, I stood in the foyer of the Penthouse. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the floor, the same floor where strangers had stood a week ago, measuring my life for their own furniture. A locksmith was kneeling at the door. He was installing a high-security Medeco deadbolt, the kind that cannot be picked, bumped, or drilled. "You want the electronic keypad too?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just the key, a physical key, one that cannot be hacked." "Smart," he said. "Here is your set. You are the only person in the world who has these." He handed me 2 heavy, silver keys. They felt cool and substantial in my palm. "Thank you," I said. He packed up his tools and left. I locked the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click, a solid, heavy sound. I walked into the living room. It was silent. For years. I had thought silence was lonely. I had filled it with Philip's chatter, with my parents' drama, with the noise of trying to please people who only saw me as a resource. I had thought that being locked out of the family was a punishment. But as I looked out at the lights of Riverton twinkling below, I realized the truth. The locked status on the county recorder's screen hadn't been a glitch. It had been a prophecy. I walked over to the safe I had installed that morning, a heavy, fireproof box bolted to the floor of the closet. I opened it. Inside were the deed to my home, my passport, my birth certificate, and the divorce petition I would file tomorrow. I wasn't holding on to the past. I was securing the future. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Aunt Judy. "The family is devastated. How can you sleep at night?" I picked up the phone. For the first time, I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I didn't feel the need to explain. I deleted the text. Then I blocked the number. I walked back to the window. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. Below me, the city moved on. Cars drove, lights changed. People rushed to homes they may or may not own. I took a deep breath. The air in the apartment tasted different. It didn't smell of Philip's cologne or my mother's perfume. It smelled of lemon oil and peace. My name was Ruby Foster. This was my home, and for the first time in my life, the record was clean. Thank you so much for listening to Ruby's story. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and resilience, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this satisfaction with even more people. Until next time, keep your records locked and your eyes open.